I call the meeting to order again, just to, yeah. I think we're all set.
Okay, good. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and John, if you can do the roll call.
DeSico. Dimovic.
Here.
Heckman. Slaughter. Here. Stimson. Here. Stuckey. Here. Willie.
Here. We're going to go ahead and start with communications to the board. So if there's any citizens who want to provide 5 minutes, you're welcome to take the podium.
I brought some notes. I wouldn't go off topic. I'm working very hard in putting this map together. I do want to thank you for that. My comment just relates to having a clear line of sight between the mission statement and decisions regarding the STRs. And I know at one point in time I mentioned that the North Star should be the mission statement, and I know you're all working hard to accomplish that. I know everybody here has probably different intentionality, motivated by different things, but yet I do hope that the decisions that are being made are keeping in mind the residents of and I just like to mention, in addition to that, that whatever direction you go in, whether it's hopefully it would be proactive and reactive. Reactive meaning putting items in place that will help solidify the direction that you're going in, i.e. maybe someone that's a code ambassador or something like that. But hopefully that person will have the skills and the knowledge to accomplish the job, and also the resources to do their job, and also clear objectives relative to accomplishing the work. And I know it probably won't be an easy job or an easy role, but I think with your direction and the things that you got in place, it would be easier for that person to accomplish and be successful in that role. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hello again, Chris Bellingham with 6871 Highway 9. I want to echo gratitude for the ongoing work you're doing to keep this process moving forward. Tonight, I actually want to address the policy question, because I'm a little concerned that one of the important facts on the ground have gotten forgotten in some of the conversations that were had at the last meeting. I want to go back to June 16 meeting when Chad told the board that the software company that you guys are hiring is estimating that Blue River has about 682 individual short-term rental listings online. And those various listings represent about 490 homes currently operating as short-term rentals in Blue River. That's what the experts we're hiring say. It's the best facts on the ground that you have. And that number represents a major problem for the policy that's being considered. So I want to say it again. The most informed estimate you have is that 490 homeowners are currently advertising and operating their homes to some degree as a short-term rental in Blue River. And so if we do the math on that, a 25% cap on the roughly 800-ish houses that we currently have allows about 200 licenses. Currently, there's a little over 200 licenses. And the best facts we have from the experts tell us we have 490 houses we're actually talking about. Now, even if that ends up being a little high and that number goes down, that's more than half the homeowners in Blue River. More than half of our homeowners in our town want the freedom to be able to rent out their house. Is this board really prepared to shut down half of them? Even if you grandfather in everyone that currently has a license. And hopefully, those of us who are trying to follow the ordinance but got caught up in this moratorium, you will still have hundreds of houses and owners to deal with. So when the software puts together the list of those houses, the board faces a choice that hasn't actually been thought through or discussed. Are you going to try to bring them into compliance and grant amnesty and go significantly over that cap, generating a decades-long wait list like Blue River has? Or are you going to force the shutdown of half the short-term rentals currently existing in our town, affecting hundreds of homeowners? Both of those outcomes create a serious problem the board hasn't yet considered, and both of them also cut off a significant source of revenue that the board actually needs for the enforcement software and the code officer that everyone in the town agrees we need. When you talked about paying for the software and how expensive it was said, we'll bring in additional revenue by bringing people into compliance. So if you're going to move forward with a cap before just trying enforcement, which is what I think we should be doing, a cap of 45 to 50% is a number that's actually rooted in the best information you have that would be actually more workable once the software is up and running and still prevents further saturation of the town. Now, I recognize that 40 to 45 or 45 to 50% is a number that doesn't really sound great to a lot of people, but it's honest and it's practical. And it's a number that even the mayor said he could live with in the last meeting he attended in late June. So before finalizing 25%, I'd respectfully ask the board to consider 3 questions. What is going to happen to the roughly 270 currently unlicensed owner once enforcement begins? What's the plan? Second, where does the revenue come from for the enforcement software and the enforcement officer that we need to hire? And then third, is a 25% cap actually healthy, rooted in the facts, and represents the desire of the majority of homeowners in Blue River? Or is it just a number that sort of sounded good and kind of made sense when we pulled it out of thin air? Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm David Bauer, live over, we throw baseball in my house from over 277 Whistling Pines. I just wanted to shine a light on kind of my personal experience over last week with some of the new things being rolled out. Not because I'm particularly interested in this policy, which you might be like, why am I up here? Because I'm really interested in just the relationship between the community and the town and how you can foster that through better transparency with all this. So my personal story here is that on August 7th, and by the way, thank you to John for just the outstanding communication through this process that you're about to hear. But on August 7th, I received an email from the town saying that my short-term rental license has been revoked because I failed to provide the documentation on liability for insurance. So I was under the impression that I was compliant. I received correspondence back in March to submit that information. My understanding is that I uploaded that to the portal and then maybe some technical glitch happened and it didn't go through. But 5 months have passed and I received no communication that I'm out of compliance. Until coincidentally 7 days after a moratorium was put in place, I get an email saying your license has been revoked and you have no recourse because there's now a moratorium. So this situation is concerning because that's just, in my opinion, a lack of transparency that I think is going to foster some tense relationships between community members and the town. Just to shine a light on this, like, you know, when I have a late fee from the library at Breckenridge, I get like weekly emails for $1.50 late fee. When my parking meters expired in Breck, I get push notifications in the app saying, you know, your meter's about to expire. This just eliminated $50,000 of income from my household. And I got that with no warning. So I'd ask that be reinstated immediately. And I think this should be a pretty simple decision, to be honest. So, and then I'd ask just for better transparency. Like it seems like between 7/31 and now, there's been an uptick in enforcement without a lot of transparency as to what you're really enforcing and why. And I'm the subject of that. I think unfairly because I've actually been in compliance the entire time. Chad, you have an email, so I got to face it. An email on this topic. But is this a decision you all can make now, or can you tell me what the decision process would be to reinstate this?
The public comment is a one-way avenue.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, I just appreciate your
Yeah,
communication,
well, yeah.
please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Anyone? I'll go ahead and close the public comment, and we'll just dive into the work session on short-term rental. I don't know. Kat or Bob, you want to kind of go over what she presented here?
Well, what we received an agenda last meeting, which had kind of a litany of items on it. You spent most of the time on the issue of capping. And I think what's more important right now is for you to get a download of the information from the subcommittee with regard to kind of the numbers and all the stuff that sounds like they're proposing. Once you get that comfortable, maybe go back to the issue of caps, and then we'll talk about the other issues the first time.
I'm happy to provide a summary of the subcommittee information. And you will find that on page 2 and 3 of the agenda packet. Subcommittee met in a public meeting at 10 a.m. on July 31st. The minutes will be provided at the next regular board meeting for review and approval. Trustees in attendance as members of subcommittee, Trustee Demovich, Trustee Slaughter, and Trustee Stimson. The subcommittee discussed STR policy with a focus on 2 specific issues, which was the intent of the subcommittee: the use of zones to manage short-term rentals, and the possible use of a cap system to promote equitable percentages of STR saturation across town limits. As a member of the town staff, I provided 3 different zoning options as potential starting points, which had 4 zones, 5 zones, or 6 zones. And additional data was provided that showed STRs by neighborhood and by proposed zones. The zones that were provided and discussed make an effort to retain neighborhoods fully within one zone or another rather than to split neighborhoods, both for ease of administrative purposes, and the intent is to have equitable spread across neighborhoods, and neighborhoods usually have something of a unique character that is being considered in these calculations. The data that was provided for consideration included percentages that have, it's a slight tweak to what the data that was initially covered in previous meetings was, and this is covering what I coined buildable lots, which is a slight distinction because previously it was built and under construction. This terminology also includes vacant lots that are buildable but weren't included in but are also not considered what is considered restricted, or like an HOA is not allowed that can be built upon, or it's open space that is not allowed to be built upon. So total buildable indicates built, under construction, vacant, but theoretically buildable. And that formula is shown in the rundown. The subcommittee decided that it was best policy to remove Spruce Valley Ranch and the associated mining claims and adjacent measure to Spruce Valley Ranch from the zoning considerations, as Spruce Valley Ranch and those areas do not allow short-term rentals, and therefore do not factor into the larger scope of the percentages being discussed. And this did remove one possible zone from each proposed map, so that does have a bit of a ratio. The subcommittee also determined that the condos which exist across the way from Town Hall, or the DOT condos, are in theory, they're functionally distinct from other developments in town limits, as it is multifamily in nature and exist as a standalone in town limits according to the design and construction of the condos. The subcommittee requested maps with 5 zones and 6 zones be provided for the board for consideration, which are included in this packet. The subcommittee also analyzed the data provided to determine what a responsible cap would be on each zone, and determined that their recommendation would be a cap of 25% on each zone for all zones in the map. Would be most suited for responsible short-term rental management going forward. This impact, depending on which map is chosen, is slightly different depending on the percentages. 25% being the set amount that was recommended. The percentages are slightly different compared to each map, depending on which neighborhoods are associated in which zones. Please remember, these are recommendations and they are not decisions. All items discussed at the subcommittee are up for consideration and revision by the board as policy is determined. These are purely recommendations to the larger board. Another note, going through the suite of the STR data based on active licenses listed on CitizenServe, I was able to pull that I had not properly indicated two STR licenses on the map and in the initial data, which are now reflected in the data. And this also would indicate if Spruce Valley Ranch and the mining claims are removed from consideration from the percentages, removes what's considered buildable lots by 54 lots in town limits. So that is also reflected in the data being presented today. So if you would have any questions on the matter, please feel free. Otherwise, we can dive into discussion of the maps and the data. I'll leave it open for a moment before I dive into the next list. If anyone has any thoughts.
Thanks. I'm going to summarize what you said to my simple, or where I think it's more simple. And that is that we came up at the end of the day with this, we felt zoning, creating zones, but and not by necessarily subdivisions, but by neighborhoods. And we thought the most fair thing to do after observing would be to put the equal number of lots in each zone. And then we did come up with, I don't think this is in here, Chad, but I think we're at about, I thought I had read somewhere that we're about 27% overall in Blue River on short-term rentals to the number of residences.
That is the built and under construction. I removed that information for one. I didn't have the time to tweak that data in the same way that this data was to have accurate information for the board today. And these zones that are shown and the percentages within this packet are based off of the buildable lots. So that's
It's
yeah,
just to
but
kind of-
correct. You are
Kind
correct.
of
Yeah.
to help clarify, why did we come up with 25%?
Yeah.
Because we're very close. If you look at the percentages now between built and unbuilt lots, according to the data, we're somewhere between 24 and 27%. So 25 seemed like a reasonable number. And it also, in my mind personally, 25% seemed reasonable because the threshold of density or how do I say, concentration of short-term rentals in Blue River has reached a tipping point, term I use, where enough people are concerned about it, quality of life, this, that, and the other thing. It's a good time. And since we're already close to 25%, it seemed reasonable. Frisco close to 25%. Why? I don't know. But if you're wondering why we came up with 25% as a starting point, that's why we did it. An equal number of properties in each zone, or we'll call it a neighborhood rather than a subdivision. Chad did an excellent job getting all this done in a short period of time, that map especially, and putting this other data together. So that's kind of my summation of how we ended up where we did. And we tried to, we had a lot of different things we're throwing around, different zones, but we ended up with the suggestions at the end. Of how many are there, Chad? There's 3?
Correct. I'll run through the data and the maps in a brief summary after your thoughts.
Yeah, that's in mind.
Okay.
That's just to help
Yeah.
me speak it out and talk it out, and maybe help someone maybe understand a little kind of how we did this. I'm sure Heather and Ted we got along and did a good job. I thought.
Yeah.
I didn't think that we determined that if that cap of 25% on each zone would be the most suited. I thought that 25% was the number to bring to the board and begin speaking about it.
This is considered what is considered a recommendation. So it's a starting point of discussion for the board to have this conversation.
Putting it out there.
Yeah. Well, Heather, you have anything that you'd like to add?
It was kind of the same thing. What I do see, I mean, we removed Spruce Valley, which it needs to be zoned because they could change their mind and start allowing short-term rentals or something. So there needs to be a zone for Spruce Valley and for any additional properties that may be subdivided or annexed into our town as well. So we need to have that as a consideration added to this, I think. And other than that too, I thought the 25% number was thrown out at the prior meeting, not necessarily at the map committee that we kind of had together looking at the different zones. But, that's my only input on that part.
Is there I guess I'd like information from all of you on which zone
Which one?
you prefer, and I guess why, I just love to hear kind of the thought process behind that.
Well, we didn't see these are kind of new maps based on, so we have not seen these maps.
Yeah, I'm happy
These
to
are
run.
adjustments based on some of the criteria that.
I'd be happy to run through this information. Yeah, these are new ones based off of the ideas that I gathered from the subcommittee meeting. If you don't mind, I'll do a little brief rundown of information and then kick it to David for a minute to discuss the chart that's at the bottom of the agenda pack as well.
So Chad?
Yes.
Before you did,
Please.
Jody, I looked this over, and if you wanna know what zone I like, is zone 1, zone 6, option 1.
And I think that, yeah, yeah, no, I appreciate you. Yeah, that's great. I think that in looking at this data, I simplified the total number of lots, which is page 4, to 3 categories, which is licensed short-term rentals, total buildable lots in each neighborhood, as well as the current percentage of short-term rentals as a component of the buildable lots, in order to consider lots that may not be built right now, but down the line are buildable and are existing as vacant. And the numbers that are indicated in yellow are the percentages that were pulled that are at or above that first talking point of 25% to guide the discussion as a cap. And for these zone options, I won't dig too deeply into each of these data points shown on page 5, but this is a breakout of the data for each of these 3 maps that are shown and the percentages within. So each one of them has a trade-off where 3 to 4 of the zones are around or exceeding the 25% recommendation. So and each one of them has a slight different tweak as to what neighborhoods exist in what zone generally. And I will make the caveat that without splitting neighborhoods, having a purely equitable number of lots in each zone is not feasible. So these were intended to show 2 different options, the 3 different options, 5 zones with the way I would deem to be the most equitable based off of a 5-zone option. And then these options 1 and 2 are 2 separate 6-zone methods. Option 1 being the item on page 7, which shows greater equitability of lots by each of these zones, potentially at the expense of as much geographic continuity. So if that is consideration, that's why I put together the option 2 for consideration. These zone numbers are not as equitable from zone to zone. It is the best effort to have geographically contiguous zones with relatively similar lot numbers while retaining each neighborhood in its entirety within a given zone. So that's really my spiel. And zones, the 6 zone options are shown as 6 zones because they break out the DOT condos as their own separate zone, as condominiums. So with that in mind, I'm gonna go ahead and kick it over to Chief for a minute here to just briefly run over the numbers the information that he's provided on pages 9 and 10 and any other thoughts he may have on that.
So, police department, we don't keep stats specifically on short-term rentals. Keep stats to how we respond to calls and what we do. So, and a lot of times I don't know when we go to a house for a complaint if it's a short-term rental or not. And so but to help this dialogue and this idea move forward, I've put together some of our experiences as a law enforcement agency working in Blue River that I hear from the local people, the residents, the people complaining and all this stuff. So it's kind of anecdotal in a sense. If I catch somebody speeding down a residential road, I don't typically know if they came from a short-term rental or not. But I'm just going to kind of talk about what our experience has been. And I guess what you guys do have on that last page, is so after last town manager left, we started to try to be a lot more transparent about locations and call types that we were getting that dealt specifically with code enforcement. And so I started creating this database starting in October where we would log the call for service, the date, time, location, what the complaint was, what we found, did we take pictures, was our body camera on, all the different things that would be used if we were going to pursue charges or whatever, or if it was unfounded. So, and I couldn't find any of the information because we did report some of this stuff prior, but I don't know what happened to those. I don't know if the town manager, what happened. I wasn't controlling it. This was information that I was controlling. I was able to get a list of registered short-term rentals from our town manager and kind of combine the two. Now, this is still very much a very thin slice of the pie of the bigger picture, but I thought it was pertinent because this represents specific addresses that we responded to dealing just in the code complaint department as well. And I'm going to get into other reasons why we respond to a house or not. But so just taking specific addresses that we went to, and you can see on the far right, we're talking about trash, noise, parking, animals, lighting, tarn meaning a short-term renter that wasn't supposed to have access to the tarn, went to the tarn, things like that. There are other code complaints, parking, and maybe trash is out in the road or something like that, that we couldn't specifically identify to a resident. So I just, that's not represented here. I didn't put just ambiguous stats in there. We do go to, large parking issues or whatever, and we don't know exactly where it was, but we can get the cars moved because that's what our job is let's get this obstruction off the road. That's what I'm concerned about. So again, just specifically with addresses, and you can see if I pull the addresses from, it was the beginning of October till about the beginning of August, it was 79, 80 calls dealing with code complaints. It turns out to be 66% of our codes, our investigations are dealing with a short-term rental. So that's it. And if you look at some of the addresses, you'll see repeating. We respond to the same address a few times, and that spikes the stats a little bit. And again, stats aren't the complete picture, but I think it does kind of shed some light on it. So that's just dealing with code-specific stuff. We also respond to residential alarms. If it's a panic alarm, entry alarm, burglary alarm, however a house might have it labeled. And we do that fairly frequently with short-term rentals. And that's not logged as one of our stats as a code complaint, because that's not one of our codes, but that's a dispatch call that we go to. And it's typically because renters aren't familiar with, the security system of the house, and they come home at night and the alarm's going off, and then we get called. And so we're responding to those. Another thing we see quite a bit is rental cars coming up from Denver, and we all know that live up here that there's adverse driving conditions. A lot of people are coming up with rental cars out of Denver that are two-wheel drive, ill-equipped to be up here. I won't say bald tires, but not winter tires, low clearances. Sometimes these people are stuck in their own driveway. Sometimes they're stuck in the middle of the road because there's snow, or they park on the road because they don't want to go down the driveway. We carry sand in our patrol vehicles and shovels so we can just help get traffic moving again and get these people going and stuff versus, sometimes we have to call a tow truck and have them winched out that they pay for. That's another thing. We get a lot of people coming up here with the wrong type of vehicle, especially trying to go up like Crown and Spruce Creek and stuff. Sometimes, I don't know how it is now with the paved section, but people couldn't even make it up that. They'd be stuck, and we'd get cars piling up on Highway 9 that were supposed to be going to short-term rentals somewhere back in the neighborhood. And they just, these people too, and it's anybody, are unfamiliar with these types of driving conditions, and I get that. And, that was that's another whole safety talk about how I was really trying to reduce the number of crashes we were having on Highway 9 because they were devastating crashes. So some of the other code complaints I was talking about, like it's unspecified exactly where the location is, and that those numbers were pulled out. So this again was just a very slim thing. speeding on residential roads. Now, for the vast majority of it, people are within reasonable compliance of speed limits. And whenever we do speed studies, we've done them on Whispering Pines and Lake Shore and Crown and Spruce Creek. We're doing another one right out here. A great majority of them are doing it, but there is evidence that people are going dangerously fast. Occasionally, like 40 miles an hour fast over the speed limit, the posted speed limit, which is very concerning to me and everybody else hopefully in this room. Those numbers are very low, right? So it doesn't necessitate us to put all our resources on residential roads to catch that one guy because there's thousands of cars count. But yeah, there are people speeding dangerously. When I've contacted people for speeding on residential roads, and this isn't something I can tie them exactly to a short-term rental, but my experience would be, and my intuition would be that they don't live here. That these are people that got out-of-state plates, and what I hear a lot is, oh, we're late to the airport, and that's why we're hauling ass right now. Okay, and maybe they do live here, maybe they, I don't know. But again, that's anecdotal. But I'm going to say the people that live here are usually pretty compliant with the rules and respecting the culture of why they live up here. We also go to criminal investigations that end up at short-term rentals. Domestic violence can be a common thing. Not common, but it would be one of the reasons I was going to do a criminal investigation in a house. People come up here for holiday parties and stuff like that. It's also a very stressful time of year. Tensions run high in the house, and we've gone to domestic violence. People have been arrested. Recently, we had a felony strangulation where the poor victim was almost unalived twice during their stay here. And these people live back on the East Coast. The suspect has been arrested since then. A death investigation. So if anybody dies outside the supervision of a doctor, it's an unintended death, and we have to treat it as a possible homicide initially, which is very awkward and uncomfortable for these poor people because death is obviously a natural thing. And if you're from out of state and you're in the short-term rental, this unfortunate situation has happened, I still have to ask you investigating questions. I have to clear that scene before I call in the coroner and they process that up. So those are all things that we've done with short-term rentals. Now, I noticed one of the sections is Highway 9. One of the reasons we were able to articulate and argue for a reduced speed limit here, because when I first got here, Highway 9 was one of the most dangerous sections of road I've ever worked in law enforcement. The cars were totaled and rolled and toned off the scene at a higher frequency than I'd ever seen before. A lot of single vehicle, and if there's multiple vehicles, devastating. The last fatality right up here, 2 vehicles. And so I was very concerned. We had the school bus stop on the highway, and I wanted to get everybody off the highway, get the speed down. But one of the reasons we were able to get the speed limit reduced by 5 miles an hour was because of all the access points, the 100+ entryways, the driveways, and stuff like that. And if we look at the map, there's quite a few short-term rentals on that. And that's now increasing the number of service vehicles and people coming and going at these points. And what concerns me is this is where the high speeds are happening. These are the critical speeds. Now, I agree, I don't want people speeding on residential roads where you guys are walking your dogs and kids are walking to the bus and just out in public. But if you get hit at 40+ miles an hour, the chances for a fatality drastically go up. Since we've reduced the speed limit, the number of skid marks on the highway is drastically reduced as well. But that was another one of the anecdotal points I made sitting out there, because that's part of my job, is I sit on the road and watch traffic all day and try to catch the bad guys. The near misses that were happening because cars are stopping or pulling into driveways, or people are coming up, they're looking for their address, they're confused, disoriented, driving slow. Sometimes they appear to be drunk drivers. I've followed people like, oh, this guy's drunk. Oh no, he was just lost. He found his home. We're good. But one of my arguments was if you don't believe it's unsafe, look at how many skid marks we see at all these intersections. Cars are locking up their brakes left and right. It's terrifying to watch traffic on a day-to-day basis. There's still skid marks out there, just not as bad. But again, it's this people coming and going. I often watch people run stop signs and stuff like that, hitting the highway because the window of getting on the highway safe is small. We've expanded it slightly, and we've dropped our crash numbers a little bit, which makes me happy. But still, like, this highway is the existential threat to this community as far as I'm concerned. So, but I see we got a lot of short-term rentals on there. That concerns me that a lot of cars are coming off and on that highway. That point, we've had cars trying to make a left-hand turn while someone's trying to pass them, and it's all double yellow. You can't pass. And then cars are turning into each other. So someone's trying to make a left, people get impatient, start passing where they're not supposed to. And we have these types of crashes as well. A new topic that's coming up for me is looking at all the dots on the map and potentially understanding that all these people are from out of town and I've got some sort of emergency where I need to evacuate. If there's a fire or maybe in a smaller situation, there's law enforcement activity in an area, how do I communicate effectively with all these people? How do I get them out? We don't have the infrastructure like Breckenridge or some of the other towns that have these larger police departments and larger resources. And I understand, like, that's the same challenge they would have, right? If they had to evacuate people out of Breckenridge for some reason, but they've got larger number of resources to help manage that. We've got a very small team. Potentially, if you looked at these as just like all rental units, apartments or hotel rooms or something, like a lot of tourists in our town. And it's concerning to me is this, if I have some kind of mass event, how am I going to be able to communicate with them? And even because sometimes, like in fires, we'll go door to door, say, hey, you guys, it's evacuation time, you got to go. And if I'm like, hey, drive towards Fairplay, do they even know where Fairplay is? If I say drive north, do they even know which direction north is? Do they even have the car to get out of the driveway? So that's something I need to address as the public safety official here too is, and cellular reception up here is also an issue. And that's one of the ways, like Summit County Alert System works is off cellular reception. Am I going to be able to hit it? And that it doesn't matter if you're a renter or not. That would be an issue that affects long-term people as well. Did they get the message that we're under evacuation or something? There's important information they need. So that's just my anecdotal discussion with it. I'm not for or against short-term rentals. But it does affect our town. And it affects our workload as a police department. We spend a lot of time dealing with issues around, I guess, tourism, people that aren't here full time or very familiar with this area. And this is a very unique environment. We've also, a couple other things. We did have some people at a short-term rental that were harassing a bear. That bear ran out to the highway and got killed. We've got pictures of people urinating in the driveway that have been submitted from short-term rentals. And there is nothing more frustrating than waking up in the morning and seeing the beer cans and all the crap in the road from the party that happened the night before. I mean, I get that. And I get the frustration from the people that live here. Having to wake up and see that and deal with that day in and day out. And then we're also frustrated too sometimes. And this is a conversation we're going to have later about the enforcement piece, about being able to serve our community and do the right thing and kind of correct some of these issues. Does anybody have questions for me?
On the trash, is that mostly what you're talking about, that next morning kind of trash? Or is it like trash can's been knocked over, the bear's got it everywhere? Like, is it improper storage or is it more the aftermath of
it's both. It's both. I mean, because we have bachelorette parties, we have, there's this wedding party, people come to party. And their guests come and go and leave beer can, leave the party and drop them in the road as they're going away that night. I mean, I see them both.
I guess it'd be important to know, like, with our current staffing model, is this even attainable at where we're at?
Well, I think we're having this discussion, right? Because people are upset and they're not happy with the results that they're getting. People are complaining, but the issues continue to persist, I guess. It's not like every night we're running from call to call to call, but they're there.
Yeah, it looks like it's a impact on the health, safety, and security of every property in Blue River. And it seems to be clearly impacting the quiet enjoyment of those properties. So how do we deal with that portion? We shouldn't have to be trying to enforce regulations that there isn't part going on, that there are impacting the quiet enjoyment of everybody's property. And it does seem like we're utilizing a lot of our town resources for policing that activity, when it should really be a rare occurrence, I would think, in a residential neighborhood. You should be able to expect quiet enjoyment of your house or property. And that quiet enjoyment is the health, safety, and security of that property as well. So I do see quite a bit of impact in calls coming in at the level we're currently at, which makes me think we need to lower it to see what comes into play and how we can enforce that better. And see, I don't know when this software comes in, if it will help with some stuff, but it's not going to assist with some of these health, safety, and security items.
I have a comment. Chief, one, thank you. This list, especially where you shared your calls with the town, and then we could cross-reference to short-term rentals.
Correct.
So it's a big piece. When you come to this in enforcement, you're gonna get a lot of the calls. And I think to this point, a lot of the reasons some people don't get slapped on the hand is because those calls, that violation never gets to town hall. And this really is helpful. This will somehow, I don't know how easy this is for you to take just the general, like you did this list, how hard that is to do. That I think is a very big missing piece now that would be very helpful to the town as far as enforcement. Number two, Heather, I think we gotta be careful. Chief brought up a lot of challenges that he has to deal with. And certainly short-term rentals contribute to that, but it's not just short-term rentals. I don't think we got to be careful not to demonize just because all this stuff's happening. It's not just short-term rentals. I've got a long-term renter that lives down the street. Last weekend, I think it was. They're nice people. They're nice neighbors. They had a Mexican wedding, and it was massive, and it was happening all day long. No big deal. Cars parked all up and down the roads. Didn't bother me. I said, whatever, let them have a good time. Well, they had a DJ out there at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I said, okay, we're talking loud. They were having a great time. It was neat to see, but it was quiet time at that point, right? It was past 9, it was like 10 or 11. I called the police. Chief may be aware of this call. They're not short-term renters.
Do they have an event permit? Because you're supposed to
I
have an
don't
event
know.
permit for that activity.
The point I'm trying to make with that is,
Barry, I think it's the last 2 calls on that list. This might be what you're referring to.
yeah, I just wanted to make a point that I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of what Chief is saying is all because of short-term rentals. And I think everything we're doing right now, like we need to lower the percentage or do this, that, because what Chief is saying, these issues about getting onto the highway, that's everybody's problem. That's not just short-term rental. there could be people that come up here that have a second home that don't need short-term rent, that don't have a car with the right snow tires, because they just don't know. There is living on Spruce Creek Road, I'm very aware of the people that are speeding. Chief's right, I think that most of the people going up to Mohawk these days and everything, they're really kind of not speeding. The people I notice speeding are the people that are doing service. They go up and down that road once, twice, 3 times a week, whether it's a trash truck, a hot tub maintenance truck. They're the ones that are in a hurry. They know the police aren't out there and they're not, we just can't control those. They're the ones that I see really speeding. Mostly. Just as an observation. So, but I really appreciate this, Chief, and I think that this is a step in the right direction in terms of trying to get your calls in line so we can implement those into the cross-reference to short-term rentals.
This is what I imagine this code person does is
That they
manages
take your
the data,
information,
right?
and then we take it from there.
Correct.
Because especially when it comes to parking and noise, I see the police being called more than a code enforcement officer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, thanks. I appreciate that. That was great.
This is important data to kind of cross-reference all these policy points so we can make an informed decision. We won't get to the enforcement broader scale of brass tacks, unfortunately, this meeting, just to the scope of the policy that's going on. But I think this is a good prerequisite to understanding the enforcement criteria, and it's a necessary component to understand in generating policy. So that's why thank you, Chief, for getting this to our attention. And I think it was useful to have it at this junction in the conversation to set up the enforcement conversation, but also right now couch this in this policy meeting.
I think, if we could just kind of go around and everyone kind of talk about the maps, the zones, how you feel about it, and what you believe makes sense as a county. And maybe.
I kind of said my piece.
Yep.
I will add that Chad had his comments when we were doing these zones and what he felt from it. He also has a different view on this, and one of it's the administrative side of it. Less zones for him meant less complication. I think, Chad, am I right?
Correct.
The more zones you have, the more complicated it was mine. And I think when you talk about geographically, does that matter to you as far as administration? Because when I looked at this and I said zone, what did I say? Zone option 1, zone 6.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it from trying to be equitable in terms of number of properties. I think we did a smart thing by taking Spruce Valley Ranch out, making dot condos independent, another zone. But in my mind, I'm trying to make this fair. How did we come about this when we have these public hearings or whatever?
Yeah.
And say, how did you guys think about this? So that's how I thought about it. Trying to be fair. And I thought you did an excellent job.
I appreciate that. I will remind everyone, these are not the 3 options you have to select. These are just ideas that are put together where that zone option 1 has, in theory, the most equitability based off of number of lots between zones, where the smallest is 151 lots and the largest is 167. So it's not a 1-to-1 scale, but it's about as close as can be theoretically done with the different sizes of neighborhoods in the area. And in management, the idea of geographical consistency is more of the intent of understanding. We're trying to make, I guess, as close to apples of regions as possible. Where if we were to, you could slice and dice it in theory, but geographical boundaries make the best approximation the town can make of trying to make a similar set of homes in similar areas. Obviously, that doesn't exist as universal, but it's the best effort that can be approximated. And in that frame of reference, if we were to say, hey, geographical similarities are our key priority here, I would recommend option 2 as the more reasonable, the two options. If we want to say that lots are a greater thing while trying to retain the best equitability of lots and geographical zones in the best way we can do it, then I recommend the 6-zone option 1. And then if we wanted to say if 5 lots and we didn't want to consider DOT condos, that's where the 5 zones come into play. If you don't include the DOT condos as its own individual item, which is also I would consider fairly equitable because there's a difference between 162 lots on the small side and 177 on the large side. So it's once again, and if we were to say this is a living document, it's a living item, and year after year it can be analyzed by the board. That's why I suggest this Spruce Valley Ranch with the recommendation from the subcommittee, as well as what we're looking at here, was removed from the item, because if they decide, hey, short-term rentals are a thing we want to pursue, that can be addressed by the board and remedied by creating a new set of zones. But with the current situation that goes on in town, that's why it was not included as a zone in this iteration.
And I think it's fair to say zone, Spruce Valley Ranch won't go to short-term rentals.
So yeah,
And if it did, when they vacate that covenant, we'll know about it, and we can create a zone out of it, and we can impose a cap on it. Because there won't be a license in there when they first start, right? So they'll build up to some level you'll set, so I'll have plenty of time to address that.
And just to clarify something I said earlier, and I think that the 3 of us would agree that we tried to come up with some zone ideas that we all kind of had a consensus on. I think we're on consensus on that. 25% was thrown out there. I know that some people think that's too high. Some people think it could be higher. Some people think we should have no rentals at all. So I want you to know that the 25% was, I will say, not necessarily a consensus. But I think, Ted and Heather, do you think the zones that we put forth for the trustees was kind of a consensus of a good process?
Yeah, I mean, we tried to have a consensus on the zones as we broke them out, and the identification of 25% as a number was relative to coming up with the zones and not necessarily relative to what we were going to pursue or a goal or anything like that. It was just to try and be equitable in terms of how we were breaking out zones. It was kind of, I mean, it seemed like the number that made the most sense to, like, most of the zones were slightly above that, and some neighborhoods, not necessarily zones, were somewhat below that. But regardless, yes, I think that we had consensus on zones.
Yeah, I mean, pull the condos out because they're a different type of density that comes into play. So I don't know if we want to look at a different cap on condo building versus the town as a whole, or if that's even.
I think it'd be good to just say, just maybe take the percentages in the zones, 2 separate, like just ask the group on just, what do you think of the zone idea? And just start.
I don't think they have to functionally be hand in hand. The zones were not created with the intent of having a certain percentage of short-term rentals sit in certain zones. These are based off of geographical proximity and theoretical equitability based off of number of buildable lots.
It'd be good to get the consensus of
Yeah.
the group on zones specifically. What seems to make sense to the group? We tried to narrow it down and come up with an idea. It's just what makes sense to the group as far as zone.
Yeah, and I think we liked the 6 zones. And you said that option 1, it keeps subdivisions more aligned.
All of them, fortunately, in all 3 of the maps, no subdivision is subdivided in any of the maps. The option 1 has a better potential spread of minimum to maximum number of lots in each zone, at the slight expense of, it's not what I would consider as geographically convenient. It still is fairly equitable and reasonable, based off of where the locations are, and it does still maintain connection points, but that's the trade-off that exists.
I think the zones I liked because you're trying to keep specific kind of areas from getting too congested. I do believe in probably a zone cap and a town cap as a whole.
May I comment on that, just as an observation?
Yeah.
When we did the zones, it's really, when you break down the zones and the percentages of rentals in those zones, it's real close to 25%. So in terms of, we talked about the overall town, but they were already, depending on whatever percentage the group decides on, if they go down this road, you're gonna have.
Sure,
It's
I get
gonna
it. The lots
So
are
we
close,
took
yeah.
that out of the equation, Jody, just because it seemed to complicate it.
Sure.
But we talked about that for a while. Town zone and then just each.
It's a hard question.
I give you guys a lot of credit for trying to do the zones. And as I look at it, like it does make sense sort of geographically. I struggle with all the maps and I don't have a solution, right? It's easy to sit back, like I wasn't there, I didn't help you guys do it, to sit back and pick it apart a little bit. But when we get into the biggest neighborhood, which is also my neighborhood and others and Ted's neighborhood, we end up with only a couple access points, right? So no matter how you divide up 96, Mountain View, all these, right? And I see lots of these lines cut in, the access is still from one place, right? So no matter how you cut that neighborhood up and decide what it is, it's almost all accessed off Blue River Road, right? That entire neighborhood from Blue River Road to the bottom of Pennsylvania Gulch, right? That basically that whole neighborhood. I know there's a little bit of access from the old way down there where we built the bridge. There's some tiny things in there, but the lion's share of all of that access is off Blue River Road. So even as you cut that neighborhood up, you can say, well, this is this zone, and this is this zone, but 100% of that traffic is coming in one way. And I don't know that there's a better way to do it. It's just as I keep scrolling through these maps, I just keep looking at it over and over. And by cutting the houses out, it doesn't really change how it comes together for me. It's still, I think he said it really good last time, right? That old sign that we all remember, right? Blue River Estates, leisure living, right? That is a neighborhood to me. Like that is one, and it's one access. So I really struggle with having to cut that one into pieces. And I know as you go through even what we have for short-term rentals, because of the way it is divided up, there's a lot more short-term rentals in that neighborhood, but we keep dividing them into these little pieces so it doesn't seem like as much. Where I think the numbers are greater in there. And then I'm going to beat up on Bari a little bit. And this is not part of this conversation, but you talked about your neighbor, right? Long-term neighbor. You had an issue with them, right? You did what you had to do. You called chief, came out, took care of whatever we needed to do. And I feel for that, right? Like we all have neighbors, we've all been through that. What if that was the case more times than not? Right? If that was an STR and you're like, all right, big wedding, big pain, like it was hard. I had waited till 11. I gave him grace. But what if 2 weeks later there was a new wedding, right? And that was your daily existence, right? And we look at Chief and what he put together, right? And if he labels it as 67%, sounds like it's a fuzz or 66 and change of calls related to STRs. And Jody even said it, like the speeding is maybe more from service people coming in and out. So that also goes into that STR. It feels like we have all of these things to consider, and the lion's share of the problems are coming from STRs.
Well, how do you quantify that then?
Well, I go by the chief.
I mean, if you're going to make that statement, then give me proof.
I go part of it is off what we have right here.
I don't see it.
It's 67%, says it right here.
So let's just say we had no short-term rentals. You don't think we'd still have these problems?
Would we eliminate problems? No.
No.
That's not what I'm saying. Not that. All right. I mean, come on. I'm not going to say that. But I'm saying if there's multiple calls at multiple addresses, it may not even be the same short-term renter. So you're given a system where we have to educate every single person that's going to rent for the lifespan of that rental. Because chief goes, talks to them, parking's an issue, this is an issue, right? We go through, right? And I know we have a system to penalize licenses to do these things,
Exactly.
right? But then the next renter comes in. So I ran into
But
the
it
same
doesn't
thing.
matter.
I ran into the same question, like, how much do we put our neighborhoods through to get to that point? Yep, you gotta complain every time. And then when that short term goes away, maybe there's another one that comes up. And you gotta complain every single time against that one until it changes. Like, I just don't
They
know.
lose their license. That's why we need enforcement.
I understand, but there's nothing to say that a new short term, so let's say they got rid of one license is gone, right? That was done. And the new one comes. And you say, okay, now your new job is this one, right? It seems futile in a lot of ways.
Not if you've got a rules and people, let's just say you have the 3-strike rule right now, they lose their license. If they're a habitual person that breaks the rules, they're out. That's gonna take care of it. And just so you know that they did this study back, one of the other things I noticed in 2024, that the Board of Trustees did the same exercise we did as far as stats. I think they had 229 short-term rentals at the time, and I think we have like 200 and.
That's ballpark, yeah.
The short-term rental numbers have gone down in reality compared to their statistics and our statistics now, from what we know. And I think the more rules you have and the more you enforce them, I think what you're going to see over time is by a natural, just people are going to say this is too much trouble to deal with this. Because the road you're going down, Ben, is let's just don't have any short-term rentals at all. Because that you say you don't have a solution.
Which I mean, I do think I think that's consistent with the mission statement of the town as well.
So just say it. You don't want short-term rentals.
As we build evidence, I would have never put myself in the camp of not having short-term rentals. As we go through this exercise and we keep going down this road, I keep leaning further and further to having no short-term rentals. And that's as honest as I can be. If you would have asked me 6 months ago, or like, how do you see this system working? The more we get into this, the more I lean away from it.
And so let's pretend, wave your magic wand, and we have no short-term rentals, but we still have these problems. Then what? Because these, like a hot tub guy going down the road, it's not just for short-term rentals; it's for second homeowners too.
Barry, this
Or
is
primary.
for all of
But
us
as
to
he
have a
goes down,
chance.
but as he
And
goes down the
so
road,
he's going to give his opinion.
I know, but he said I'm going to pick on you, Barry.
That was like for a second, right? Like this wasn't all a pick on Barry.
Well, don't you think this is a good debate?
I agree.
Does it not help?
So is that same hot tub guy going down the road 15 times? Was he going down once? Is there a difference in that
I
scenario?
don't know.
Is he servicing a hot tub after every rental? Or is he servicing a hot tub twice a year?
In reality, it's not after every rental.
So that's fine, but do we agree, Barry, we can come to a simple agreement. Do you service a hot tub more for a short-term rental?
Yes.
For somebody who's
Yes,
there
you
long?
do. I
So,
agree with that.
okay, then that's all I'm saying.
But let's
I don't have the ability,
Let's don't microanalyze it.
I don't have the ability to tell you which number, but if we have fewer hot tub services, in reality, we have fewer people on the road. Fewer cleaners, we reduce our impact.
I will say again, one of the positives of this sort of program the town has set up and the way we can look at this is that this doesn't have to be something that we set now and we say this is what the life of the town of Blue River is going to be for perpetuity. So we can always make these decisions and then analyze the data following these set decisions and come to a conclusion. So it depends on whichever way the board leans, and if it's no STRs, we can analyze the data off no STRs. If it's 25%, we can analyze it off 25%. So obviously, weighing this consideration is critical to this junction in time, but it does not mean we have to shut the book on the way that the system operates in town. And that's a part of the positive of having an annual renewal system. So I think that we don't have to, I just want to make sure we avoid the idea that we have to get this, we want to get this as perfect as possible. We don't need to get this on the dime perfect because we have the opportunity to fine tune it as problems arise and we address these problems. So, and the problems were there, so that's why we're addressing it right now. So we just need to make sure we come to a consensus, and then we can work on that as that arises. So this is a fruit that can a tree that can keep bearing fruit year after year. It's not something to not a one annual and it dies, I guess is the analogy to make. So just to make sure we all keep in mind that we don't have to get this, that we want to make sure we get this right, but we have the opportunity to reevaluate.
And I'll add to that. So my view of this, or what about this, is that if you are okay with 25% that we currently have, given law enforcement and the upcoming enforcement requirements, if you're okay with that 25 works, if you think there's benefit in reducing the number, the way you reduce the number is reduce the percentage so that you're not issuing back up to 25. When you lose 3, 3 more come on. You lose 3, 3 more come on. If you need them to go down, you set a lower count. That's just the way it works. The question is, are you happy now? Do you think it could bear more? We heard tonight by a speaker that we perhaps should be 50% of the entire time. Is that the cap number? If you want to have more, that's the way to do it. Raise the cap number.
I feel like
I looked at that map and I was shocked. Absolutely shocked. And another trustee labeled it, our town has monkeypox. Well, I have tried to put aside the fact that I've been hanging out here since I was in a single digit midget. And none of this was here. None of this happened. Half these houses weren't here. I mean, I've tried to open my mind and everything, but you know, in point of fact, Ben brought up the mission statement of the town, and I actually had pulled it up right before you even said that. You know, conserving our natural residential environment, unity with our neighbors, channeling the voice of our residents, and enhancing the quality of life for us all. So that is hard to reconcile with that. And the farther that we get into it, and I wanted to do this when I first ever got on the board. We didn't have a board at that time that was even willing to discuss it. And Ted Pilling, rest in peace, wanted to see this map, and he asked over almost every meeting for the data to be presented in a way that made more sense or that was easier to digest or easier to see. Well, you can see it right there. And to me, it's a little, I don't like looking at that map. That map makes me want to err on the side of caution and set the lowest possible number that we can. And I think it's pretty bold to come in here and say that we haven't thought about. We may not have discussed in public, but I can guarantee you that a lot of the things that were alleged that we don't think about, I certainly have thought about. I have given thought to all of these people that own these houses that are represented by a dot of varying colors on this map, and what happens to them if we change our stance, reduce the number that we allow, and everything else. And it's not easy to think about. It's not easy to come up with solutions that will make everyone happy. But really, and that's the other thing is we've tried to, discussions in the past have circled around second homeowners and, you know, what they don't vote. So what do they count? You know, what does their opinion count? Well, they own a house here, so their opinion counts for something. So different ways to weight that. That's been bandied about in the past. And short-term rental owners are now another whole separate category of people because they're not second homeowners. To my mind, they're business owners. And I mean, we look like a hotel town. And circling back to the mission statement, you know, I tend to value what the people who live here think and feel, and what their feedback has been to us is that this is out of control, and we have to put a handle on it. And I understand that's what we're trying to do, but to me, maybe less is more. And I don't think 25% is a good number. I would prefer to go lower. And I'm with you, Ben. The longer we get into it and the more that we talk about it, I liked it, you know, when there was no short-term rental here. And I know that that's hard for some people to hear, but it was a different place. And I never had to lock my car doors. I didn't lock my house. Shortly after short-term rentals came to this town, I walked outside and every single vehicle, and I own a fleet, by the way, had the center consoles up and the glove boxes open. And it wasn't somebody who lived here. And I mean, the chief has 70% of his calls roughly. Chad, how much time do you spend of your 100% of your working hours? What would you guesstimate off the top of your head is the percentage of hours that you put towards short-term rentals and dealing with something short-term rental related?
Well, I suppose this is probably an inflated number because of the existing situation that's going on. I've kind of come into a situation that necessitated a higher percentage at the given moment. But it's hard to answer that because the town manager is vested in large part with responsibility for doing all the administrative action related to code enforcement penalties. And that has been something that I have not had the ability to tackle with the gusto that I would like to be doing. And in large part, it's just due to the fact that there are too many different constraints on the position. There's a possibility that given if I was in a normal day-to-day operation, if we weren't even discussing this and we did have the bandwidth to do code enforcement, that 40 to 50% of my time is spent with short-term rentals.
Okay, and John to be, well, would you estimate the percentage of time that you devote towards short-term rentals is?
At least 70.
At least 70, 40. Bob?
I will tell you that if we're gonna increase enforcement, my effort has to go up. The amount of time it took to revoke the one license that we did 2 years ago was a lot of time.
And that's the only license that this town has ever revoked. And that particular,
Well, the license was never.
I stand corrected.
Well, the license was never issued. There was a difference between the 2026 calendar year was not issued, was not revoked. There's a slight distinction.
Right, you weren't revoked for like misbehavior, trash. I mean, this lady had party after party after party. I lived down the street from her. We saw it. I recused myself and spoke to no other trustee about her situation, by the way, because I was absolutely biased and would not have been able to vote fairly on that particular instance. You know, right? So we're talking about now how much of the town's budget does short-term rentals bring in? Another thing that I have thought too is $350,000 a year.
That is the estimation of the current given year and I will make that with several distinct points and flags to raise here. Number one, that was created based off of the increased compliance requirements that we've had this current year, changing some of that, including an increase in registration costs. I couldn't definitively tell you where we're going to end at the end of the year, but the biggest challenge is it is very hard to make an adequate determination for 2027. It depends on, number one, the policy made. Number two, the accuracy of lodging tax reporting that is going on at the current moment, and the amount that people, and not all licensed STR holders adequately do lodging tax reports. We may have licenses that exist in our system that we have not fully caught up to, in the sense that they may not be up to date on their lodging tax remittance. So that is my challenge. But yeah, sorry, just to make those.
My point is that it's not a significant portion of the town's overall budget. Short-term rentals, the juice is not worth the squeeze if you break it down into how much staff time is spent on them, how much police time is spent on them, how much consternation it causes amongst the neighbors, etc., how much we're violating our mission statement. And, you know, the lady behind my other house doesn't even have a license. And I found a bag of trash in my yard again the other day, and I have pictures. And I have had every single police officer on this force currently to that property, and police officers who aren't even with this town anymore have been to that property. And not one thing has ever been done to this person. Not one thing, not one fine, not one anything. And her fire pit is 6 inches from the property line. And I brought these issues up, through the proper channels as a citizen, not as a trustee. Some of these things are what led me to running for a seat. But the more we talk about it, the more chagrined I become. And it feels hopeless. And when we talk about, the potentiality of maybe getting rid of them altogether, I see light at the end of the tunnel, frankly. And I know that that's not what some of you people want to hear. But also it takes me back to the short-term rental regulation document, paragraph 1, it's a privilege, not a right. And some people, unfortunately, seem to abuse the privilege. I'm sure that, Mr. Chris, you're going to be a great neighbor. And you guys on Calle de Plata probably are too. I'm sure you already are, sir. Present company excluded, but there are bad actors out there that, the stripper pole on Lakeshore Loop comes to mind. And my friend, Chris Daly, who's now selling his house. My other neighbor, Bill Varney, who's selling his house. And some of the things that Barry has brought up in terms of real estate stuff, I think there are 7 houses that are currently under contract in the town of Blue River, and 7 have been sold. And this is all since the 19th of May when we imposed the moratorium. So I really don't know that it's affecting real estate. And as far as values, there's one guy on Mariposa who I think complained about what we're doing as far as short-term rentals and that we're even talking about it, but listed his house with a clear identifier of no short-term rentals allowed. And I believe he's under contract right now for the price that he asked. Some of these houses that have come up in our conversations or been brought to our attention by the public, well, they've been on the market for 3 or 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 3 years. And they come in here and hoot and holler and yell about the moratorium. Well, it would be my assumption maybe your house wasn't properly priced to begin with if it hasn't sold in the 3 years that it's been on the market. You got to come in here and tell me that I've impacted your home values, or that we have. Maybe your house was you just overvalued it when you put it on the market, or it would have sold by now because these other houses are selling like no problem. I'll stop. And I don't want to disappoint any of the people that are here listening. I haven't made up my mind. I haven't closed my mind. I'm a part of a 7-member group that has been tasked to deal with this. And I am trying to keep an open mind. And I've said it before, I'd be open to the conversation. Conversation hasn't happened about, guys that closed before the 19th and didn't get an opportunity. I feel like you guys got juked by the system, and I don't like it, and that's why I'd be willing to discuss it. But we also have to see where the whole thing goes too.
I think I already said my part, but maybe we need more time for the board as a whole to look at these maps. Rather than just say we're going to go with one map or the other. I don't know. It sounded like some people were.
I think that for fair transparency and the sake of trying to make sure we get things in the window of the moratorium, if we want to maintain the existing renewal period up to November 1st to the end of the year, a bare bones would need to have the decisions crafted so that we can have adequate time to pass something at an October meeting. So realistically, to craft something of this size and scope, we need at least a few weeks, if not more, to do that properly. So we ballpark probably have about that month at the far end to decide these specifics. If we are to maintain the schedule that the town and maintain the annual renewal system that we have
I
had
agree.
for several years.
I don't wanna kick the can. I think we did a good job putting together the zones. I think this group can agree on a zone. And I think then we talk about percentages. And then like Chad said, it's a living document. If we're gonna give short-term rentals a chance, I think we're going down the right path. And let's give it a chance. And let's just, the zone thing seems like it was well thought out by the group, I thought. And I don't see why we should have to continue that. I think you got, percentages are pretty, everybody's got a different opinion on that. So you've heard mine, but I think, Jody, you haven't really said much.
Yeah, I mean, I like the zones, right? I also think 25 is too much. This started with compliance, we were in months, year of plus of meetings where public comment was on STR and what are we doing and where's the compliance and how do we enforce that? And that's where it started. And then the more layers you peel back, it's just more, right? And I love your list and I appreciate that too. I think it's missing some, but that's, you know what I mean? Like, just personally, I've called and it wasn't on the list, right? With pictures. So it was like documented. And that's not a thing against the process or however, it's too much. We don't have the staffing levels. We don't have the infrastructure. I do worry about our wells, and the insane drought that Colorado is under. All those things, when I see hoses in hot tubs, it just infuriates me. When I see the speeding hot tub guys 3 times a day, that really upsets me too, because they know me, so they know I'm gonna move out of the way with my dog. But I don't like that I have to dodge a car. I just don't think, I think 25 is too high. I think we can't handle it. We are a residential neighborhood. We have no commercial court. It doesn't make sense to me. And I feel terrible. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. It's not about that. I have empathy. This isn't easy in any way. But I think we have to protect our town and our residents. And that's how I feel. And I do think 25 is too high. So I like the zone. 25 is too high, in my opinion.
Which zone do you like?
Option 2, 1. Wait.
6.
Six.
Yeah, I should have labeled these. That's not me. That is the middle now.
I thought I didn't know we were gonna have 3 more to look at. I thought we sort of decided on the one that we liked the best.
Was 6.
But which one of these is that even?
That's 6, the second one.
Well,
It's been adjusted because we took the condo out of play
Right.
on the numbers.
And I think these
Oh, sorry, Spruce Valley.
And Spruce,
Yes.
so condo into its own.
Yeah, to do its own thing. Yes,
And
yes.
Spruce Valley.
Yeah. DOT condos is left in that first zone 5.
Right, the
Zone
second
6
one,
and
Yeah.
option 1 and option 2. Option 2, it kind of equalizes the number of lots in each zone. Attempt.
I'll rate them by. I'll just run page 6, 7, 8 here, running down the agenda from the top. The first option is 5 zones. This is proposed in an instance that the board was to not want to consider DOT condos as its own individual item. That is the sole reason that it was kept in this consideration. The second map is considered the option 1 here, is including the DOT condos as its own individual zone. And it is what I would consider slightly more equitable lot to lot number. The lots are closer in number in each of the zones. And at the expense of not having it be as desirably located, like each zone isn't an equal 20% of town limits almost, if you were to term it that way. So that is the most equitable number of lots relative to each of the zones. And then the third option here that's being proposed is 6 zones, DOT condos as individual as its own, and these are a more reasonable geographic in my opinion, are more reasonable geographic estimations of where each of these zones kind of exist in town. It's a more even split of the percentage of land, and at the expense of, for example, zone 2 has 124 lots and zone 5 has 175.
So I understand what you're saying on
Yeah.
geological.
Yes.
If you were to apply acres zone,
Mhm.
that would imply to me that geologically it's more fair. Is that what you're implying? That the zone itself it's about the same size zones by land?
My intent was a little bit more, that was part of it, but the larger scope was trying to do, like I was saying, the apples to apples of either these have similar characteristics of location. Say that they are in one component of town limits, or they exist closer to the highway or further from the highway. So it's neighborhoods that through my time here so far, I have heard enough about to understand that they generally exist in a similar atmosphere. And that was something that I was trying to make into consideration, that oftentimes, let's just discuss that way, like zone 3, like Ben said that the Coronet and Regal are generally considered a fairly similar locational neighborhood with the similar enough characteristics and challenges that it can be reasonably put into the same zone. That being said, obviously there's some weird outliers that will always exist, like the 96 or Blue River Road to the farthest extent is grouped in with an item with Blue Rock Springs. That may not necessarily be a one-to-one, but if you were to add that, if we were to purely go off of geographical constraints here, that would be a whole nother map that I would put together, but that would greatly change the number of lots per zone. If we were to say that these neighborhoods are the exact thing, it would have quite a few zones and quite a disparity in number of lots per zone.
It gets pretty subjective.
It can really get splitting hairs here if you dig down the rabbit.
So we kind of agree that zone 6 is probably the most realistic. It's just that we want one or two. Is it fair to try to get this nailed down to one of those two?
Or what are you calling zone 6? The middle map?
The middle map.
Take zone 5 out, the first
Yeah.
Middle map.
Pages 7 and 8,
Yes.
going down 2 and 3.
Yes. 7 is the one that we left the subcommittee meeting feeling all pretty good about it. Page 7.
7 and 8 are just two different interpretations of the guidance that was given of 6 zones and DOT condos being one zone.
Yeah. And I think that we liked page 7's rendering better because it was more equitable in the division of lots. In that, zone 6 zone 5 has 175 and zone 1 only has 151, but that was as close as we could get in breaking it out and still being relatively close.
I'm going to use reverse psychology. I like the second one. So people can disagree with me, go with the other one.
You're not pulling into it, sorry.
What's that?
I won't do it. You're not gonna pull into it.
Anyway, thanks, Ted. I'm with Ted.
The exact way it's done administratively is not going to change drastically depending on which map is decided at this. It is just two different proposed options based off of what is the predominant desire of the board in making zones. Is it equal number of lots, relatively speaking, while maintaining neighborhoods contiguously in different zones and not splitting them? Or do we want to have a little bit more of an understanding of there's a little bit more equal percentage of acreage and percentage of, and maybe more similar characteristics of neighborhoods in the option 2. So those are just the different considerations that are at play here. And either one is completely doable from an administrative perspective. I'm not concerned about one over the other. So I'll make that caveat here.
My point is that the middle one is the one that the three of us walked out
And
feeling
so
pretty good about.
that's 6 zones option 1.
Yes.
Correct.
That'd be my vote.
Seems like the majority of people. The consensus.
Yeah.
Luck with your reverse psychology.
Actually, I did. I used it.
It works swimming in.
Okay, what can we talk about percentages then?
Yeah.
You heard mine. I'll just reiterate. I think we're at the threshold now on Blue River. It's almost somewhere between 24 and 26 27%. 25% is kind of, if our numbers are correct. It almost, with the zones that we have, you're almost at that 25% now. You're gonna be a little under, you're gonna be a little over. And if we apply that number, it seems like we're not gonna go a lot over, or we're not gonna add a lot more of these subdivisions that wouldn't even be able to get a short-term license. Timber Creek Estates hasn't even been brought up, and it's probably the largest density.
38%.
I mean, it's a lot. I mean, they can't even, as an HOA, if you were a person that says, I want some help getting more, more compliance on the short-term rentals, there's enough short-term rentals in that they'll outvote those people every time. So they're relying on the town to come up here, which I don't blame you. And I don't like seeing what's happening next door to you at all. And so that's where the 25% came from. It seemed like a reasonable number. If we agree, if people say no, we're too much now, then obviously 25% is not a good number. Or maybe like Ben saying, I don't know, Ben, you've got that artery situation where we go to Blue River Estates, you really technically you got two ways in and out. But there's kind of.
And you can connect it all the way through and come out.
Same thing with Lakeshore. We're fortunate, we've got two ways
Right,
in. We got three actually technically, because you can
Right, you come to the top.
Yeah.
too.
I don't know how to answer that question. That's actually a life safety issue that chief has to abandon and get everybody out of the neighborhood, or there's something happening. That's a whole nother conversation in my opinion, but that's where the 25% came from.
I think with that, that's like the layers, right? So it really helps having Chief here tonight to kind of dial that in and to talk about that one road. I kind of just didn't put that together. That is crazy. And in the event of a fire or any kind of that's scary.
And that's why they redid that bridge on Blue River Road years ago.
Yeah, I mean that's super frightening. It also is very concerning that 25% of our residents is 70% of our calls. That's a significant number, and it's just staffing wise, infrastructure. 25% doesn't work for me. I am more in the vein of 10. Yeah.
Just as we make I know the enforcement compliance aspect will come later, but as that gets more robust and refined, it is more efficient.
Yeah.
Some of those numbers that I presented though are inflated because we have repeat offenders. It will knock off a little, it'll shave off some of those stats once we get more proficient at getting those people removed. But to Ben's point too, if another license pops up and the same opportunity continues, it's the same problem, right? It just happens somewhere else. But once I think the compliance issue later that we'll have, depending on how aggressive you guys get with it, I think will help to kind of curb some of these complaints. And it's the repeat calls going and going and going and stuff as well.
Well, then
So
you
you can
think
start
enforcement will help
Adding percentages.
a lot for us, right?
Down at 10, we can move it up to 13.
And I said in the last meeting, that 10%, when we go through the other towns, they all made their residential districts 10%. Frisco being the outlier, we just made a blanket 25% for the town. But the other towns have 10% for their residential. I see us as all residential, so I also like that 10% number with the ability to gain it, right? If we get a program in place that works well, then I think it's a different question.
I think it needs to be lower because we know that we have troubles right now where we're at. So adding to that is not really what we want to do. I kind of think maybe 15, 20%, but 15 possibly if we're going down somewhere.
I think 10's a little extreme. We will issue no more short-term licenses if we go to 10 for a long time. And maybe that's what your goal. I know that's some people's goal, no short-term licenses. I'd like to see a compromise. I think probably the majority of you think 25 is too much. I think it's fine. Because I think the missing piece in all this is enforcement. I think that this will take care of a lot of these problems go away. I think a lot of people won't get short-term licenses because of all these rules, and we're now finally getting our act together. in enforcement. But I'd like to see a compromise between 10 and 25. Because I know I'm not gonna win the 25% argument.
Well, I mean, I think about it in many different ways. One of the ways that I think about it is that's 1 in every 4 houses. And 20% is 1 in every 5 houses. And that's still a lot to my mind. 20%, 1 in every 5 houses. Every 5th house that you walk past when you're walking your dog is an STD.
In a perfect world.
Right. And I understand that the disparity of them or how they're spread out is not going to be that way anyway. It's 25% is every 4th house. And that just strikes me as a lot.
So the only difference between most of the people that short-term rent are good people. They're trying to be good neighbors. They love it. They're just like we do. The thing we have not given a chance at all is enforcement. We've completely, but I know, but up to this point, it's completely been this whole conversation, it's bypassed it. We're not even giving it a chance.
We were given guidance to bypass it. Gotta get the policy set.
You got is that if you spend your entire time talking about enforcement, with every single issue you're talking about, you'll never get anything.
I agree with Bob. We had to get to this point first, but I would hope that we could, because also part of this conversation is going to be with whatever percentage we agree on, what do we do with the people that already have a license? What do we do with the people that got caught up with in the middle of this moratorium that were either bought a house, are under contract right now? What do we do with them? I mean, they get caught up in something that they bought something or are under contract with you. There's understanding that they should, in my opinion, and I'll bring it up now because I think it's got to be part of the conversation. They should be granted a short-term license. Now, if we go down the rabbit, if we're going to go down, and we're even at 25%, there's going to be a lot of these zones that you can't get a short-term license in. If we go to 20%, I would be willing to bet that almost every one of them you can't get a short-term license. I'd like to see the people that were at least wanted, and we're going to be way over. And by attrition, there's going to be a wait list for all these different zones. And by attrition, somebody that's on that wait list will maybe be able to get on it at some point. But I think that needs to be part of the conversation. That we're trying to talk about percentage, I agree, but we also have to decide. And this isn't about enforcement. This is about what do we do with that group of people.
I suppose from an administrative perspective, again, that's what I seem to parrot every time I say something right now, is the decisions made on individual properties do not necessarily have to reflect against the cap that is decided at the given moment. For example, those conditional properties are being discussed here. We're not going to be in a position here that happens down to the desired effect. It does not have to be a sharp cutoff, and there's all the other implications there of if we were to cut it down to 20% or below, and then decide if we didn't grant for all the existing active licenses and what comes of that. So that we do need to discuss this, and we also can have this where the existing thing going into 2027 does not 1-to-1 have to match the percentage that we give a moment. That is the goal, and attrition will reach that point. So
can you explain that again? I don't understand that.
Yeah,
sure.
I think
It goes
Your
in a
legalese.
different way. It would be almost impossible, if not the haves and have-nots, to say those who get the licenses for the existing population. I think that is both brain damage and unfair. I think you have to say anyone who has a license in 2026 gets a license in 20. If they apply and they qualify, gets a license in 2027.
I suppose and or they submitted their logic.
Yes.
They're following the regulations as necessary.
And they continue to follow it, like the next year, as long as they don't violate, as long as they stay in compliance, they get
The attrition will come from people who have it revoked for non-compliance, who sell house, who decide to stop renting attrition. Okay, and so as we get the attrition, we're not going. If we have a low number, we're not going to add more licenses into the mix. We let the attrition come out. But the people who have licenses this year, we'll get them the next year and the next year. If they qualify in the next year and the next year and the next year, they won't be subject to elimination of their license. They'll only lose their license through the attrition. Okay?
It's much better explained than how it's.
But that's still, if you have a zone and you put, I'll use the higher number 10, not 10 or 15, but I'm sorry, 20. And we're going to establish that, right?
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
A percentage on these zones.
Yeah, we're gonna say
So we put a percentage on these zones. And we let the people that have had licenses or who have been who are caught in the middle of this, let's just say that, okay. That zone, let's just say it's at 21, 22. It cannot get any more short-term license. We do not until the number goes down.
Correct.
Okay, so that was my point.
There's a waiting list.
Yeah,
Right. We'll have to open the door for the waiting list. It'll probably be, we'll have to do some fairness there because it shouldn't just be the first in, first in gets the first license. Because we're going to have to open the door and people are going to flood in. And then how you pick the people if they all apply on the same day?
well, maybe initially, but after that, it could be by first in, first out, right?
It could. Yeah. Well, that'll be down the road. The road.
Okay.
So, but you're absolutely right. That's how it's going to work. We won't deprive people of their license if they qualify every year. And that's the equitable way to do it. Okay. As to people who, I'm struggling with this issue. As to people who say, hey, I bought the house just recently and I want to do an STR and I can't have it because of the moratorium. What are we going to say to the people who said, hey, I bought my house 10 years ago with the anticipation that I was going to get a license someday, and now the time has come. They're in the same exact boat. So we got to be cognizant of the fact that we're doing that issue opens the door to anyone who wants a license, come on and get it. It really does, because you're going to tell people if you bought 10 years ago with the intent of having an STR, we're going to honor it. And if you bought it a month ago, we're going to honor it.
Vance, I have more empathy, and I think it's a realistic thing to look at the people that were bought or are under contract that had intended to get a short-term license. The person that says, well, 10 years ago, I was thinking about it, and I really want one. I don't really think that's reasonable to say that just because we're going to give people that were caught up in the middle of this thing a short-term license, that say, oh yeah, they somehow have an argument that they are entitled to a license as well. These people got caught in the middle of the thing. I think I had those people.
Let me ask you what your cutoff date is. For having purchased the house. Now they're not like the current people who come to us and say, hey, I want to apply.
It's the person. If there's a person out there right now that bought last year and they don't have a license, they go every year. If they didn't get a license last year and they still don't have a license this year, then that's the way it goes.
So,
but if it's somebody who bought in this year, and they bought and they were hoping to get their intent, the only people I'm talking about are the people who purchase. I guess I don't know, to give you a date. I'm just going to pick a number. Okay, so we got the date, we got the number, the date that we did the moratorium. Anybody that bought maybe, I don't know how long, let's just say 30 days, 60 days before that, and wanted to get a short-term license. They were getting their ducks, but they couldn't get it because of the moratorium. Certainly the people that are pending under contract that wanted to be, I think they deserve to have the opportunity to get a short-term license. But if they bought in January, I mean, how much time does a person need? Or is it one of those things where I bought, I mean, when can you apply for a license?
Are we making the distinction of, is the date of close purchase the date that it is reflected on the assessor's website? Because oftentimes there's a delay of a little while between when they close and put the documents in and the assessor completes that document, that information right in the middle. Okay,
That's what, it's not the day of reporting, it's the day of.
okay. That, just want to make that distinction because there is that is oftentimes the greatest delay.
So-
If someone has all their ducks in a row of insurance, liability, ownership, that's a whole different, that can be done theoretically quite quickly if they have their ducks in a row. If they don't, that's another story, and that's an applicant challenge rather than a town challenge.
I think there's a legal matter a little bit, because if you have somebody who purchased, and I'm just saying, if you had somebody purchased, but somebody was building a house for the last year, and then you had people who, could say like, I remodeled, so that I don't know where that line, where it stops.
Well, the logic that Barry offered is
Barry.
I think it's the first time that ever happened. I see it's logic. I give you the credit. Okay? The logic has some weight that if they bought the house last year and didn't apply for a license, then they should be precluded from getting a license issued. It makes sense. The issue is one that Jody just brought up, which is what do you do with people who said, yeah, I bought it in February. I spent a lot of money and time. I moved out here. I spent a lot of money and time on the house with the intent of remodeling so I could do an STR, and here comes the world. So they weren't in the last year's group, didn't apply. They were in this year's group with every intent to apply, but they were spending money on the house. They should, I think, the logic should.
I don't disagree. I
qualify.
just don't disagree. That's a good point.
And so the question becomes, how do we judge those folks? I think it would have to be anybody who shows that they closed in their house in this year gets in, regardless of, I'm not going to ask them, come in and show us that you really were remodeling. Come in and show us that you really needed that time before you got a license. I think that's going to be brain damage for people other than me to kind of sort through whether those people will qualify. So I think the best qualification of objective. I bought the house in 2026.
Okay. So then there's one argument that I don't disagree with what you're saying to keep, because I don't want to overcomplicate this for the staff. And that simplifies it. Then you got that concern that when people are going to rush to get a short-term license just because, well, you got to renew it every year. You got it at the present time. You got to at least rent 10 nights. I don't know that we would get people rushing. So I don't know that it's unreasonable to say, yeah.
Let me clear. I don't think you'll get necessarily a rush. Not like you will get with a moratorium. Okay? That freaks people out. But the rush will be people who intend to rent. They're not going to come in and grab them just because. And so I think you'll get some, but not many. The issue is going to become for us, and I mentioned it last time we had our policy meeting. There's this appendix attached to caps, and that is if you take each one of those dots and make the dots smaller, would you limit the number of nights per year they can rent? So the impact goes down. Because you all, as a group, were against the idea of 24/7, 360 clause. You know?
We made a pretty strong statement.
Right. So by limiting the number of nights or number of rental nights during the year, you make the dots smaller, the impact becomes less cars in the road. Okay?
Yep.
See where I'm going? Mm-hmm. So it's an appendix to the issue of caps. Because maybe you'll be okay with a higher cap if the folks are only renting half a year worth of nights. Now, I don't want to trundle into the enforcement issue, but that becomes somewhat of a challenge to enforce. Mm-hmm. I have ideas on that. I want to talk about how we can do it. It would be a drastic penalty, like revocation of license and a ban for 3 years if you fail to report the accurate number of nights that you rented a year. If we find out that you rented more nights than you said you did, then you lose your license for 3 years immediately. Tough. That's the penalty that comes with it. So I think we'll get some compliance.
And I would parrot that being a vital importance of putting the appropriate level of penalty to that issue, if that is the avenue the board pursues. In part because software can go a long way, but there's only so much that it requires staff auditing potentially of existing information that is being provided and digging deeper into the details. So we want to make it in a sense that is not an attractive thing to do if the board is to pursue that policy and make that severe.
And the folks who are going to over rent outside the policy, the number that you may set, I'll mention that 120 nights.
a year. People who over rent are also, if they know they're over renting, they're also not going to pay taxes on it, because that's one way to find out. If they're collecting far more taxes, then it indicates that they're renting out more numbers of nights than perhaps they would normally. So there are indicators of whether they're getting over rental, but they're probably going to not pay taxes and they're going to rent out more, which is a double whammy for them.
Well, I agree with what you're saying and what Jody said. All of it.
But you have not talked about limiting the number of nights yet, which I told you.
No, but I like it. I just think you brought it up. It's hard to enforce that.
Yeah.
But you said you have some ideas on it. I'd like to discuss that because I think it will discourage people from doing what we don't want to have happen.
And what I would hope you can do is get to some policy decisions like, yes, we're going to zone, yes, we're going to cap, here's the number, and these are all holding spots, not permanent. And yes, we're going to limit 365s by some number. And let's talk enforcement. And once you understand the enforcement effort, you may reassess things like the number of nights,
right.
Reassess the number of cap. But you got to get an idea of how close you are on as a group to cap numbers, to night rental numbers, those kind of things. And then we talk enforcement, which will basically put a sharper pencil on the paper, whether you want to do 20, 50, 15%, whatever. It'll help you understand in person.
Okay, as far as percentages,
That was for me specifically.
So we're not
if that
talking
percentage was to go up, but the number of rental opportunities, nights was to go down. I think that's something that's definitely workable, right? If we're looking at, and not that these are the numbers, but if we have 10% at 100% rental, right, which is kind of what we're looking at now. If we start changing that 100% and get it down to 50 or 30, whatever it is, then this percentage on the other side can start climbing because we've changed the impact.
And because when the time comes, because we'll hire cap numbers, so when the time comes, the cap's open, you're not going to get 24/7 365s. You're going to get lower impacts STRs.
Yeah, we'll have to watch our budget too, because my intent is to have the short-term rental program pay for the software, the staffing and stuff like that.
Which is an issue in Colorado of making sure our fees are right, not taxes are right. Because taxes are general monies for everything, law enforcement, streets.
Right.
Okay? So the taxes should not be something we consider as only restricted to handling STRs. We see it unfair for the population. Just to tell you, you're going to reserve this money just for.
That's kind of the cake and eating it too. Basically.
So basically, take the taxes out of the equation. Are STRs being charged enough money when they apply for renewals, when they apply for licenses, whatever numbers we want to work? What does it cost to run the program? And I'm going to tell you this: my experience in every other municipality is that fees are often far lower than the actual cost, meaning that the government subsidizes the activity. Okay? It's just almost invariably the case. The only area I don't see fees lagging and the subsidizing of the effort is in building inspection, because building inspectors charge in accordance with a percentage of a chart, and they always make a little bit more money than it costs to inspect the house. Okay? But everything else is underpaid and subsidized by the government.
Well, yeah, I guess there's that whole lodging tax, when it's specifically labeled lodging tax, to say that necessarily isn't applied towards short. I don't necessarily agree with that. If you're not going to label it that way, then don't use it. Then you shouldn't label it. That should be. Yeah, I just think it's but
I would
it's a way my mind
impact.
Because I'm not sure fees. If you were to rely on fees alone, I'm not sure our program can sustain itself.
And I think that's a really good recognition by you, because what it says is that you recognize that the town should take its funds, its general funds, and subsidize the short-term rental.
I don't.
You think they should charge?
No. I didn't say general funds. I said lodging tax funds, not specifically, because they are a line item. It's not you just don't take all those. You have a label to it.
Okay,
we wouldn't have them if it wasn't for short-term license rentals.
Let me argue the issue. Difference between Colorado between fees and taxes. Taxes are general revenue measures. It doesn't matter what you call it. There are all sorts of different kind of taxes, including what we customarily call a pillow tax that we charge for hotels. Each room has to pay something. Those funds are not reserved just to manage hotels. It's for the streets, it's for everything. Same thing with an accommodation tax. Same thing with any title tax that you have. A tax is, by law, general fund monies to you. You do not have to restrict them to the purpose of the
Okay. So in fairness,
But fees are different.
okay,
Fees say, if you're gonna charge a fee, it better stay with who's paying the fee.
but in fairness, you can't sit there and say lodging taxes shouldn't be relied upon. You're saying government has to subsidize the short-term rental program.
I'm saying that you are not required by law to use the accommodation taxes to manage this.
So maybe not by law, but it's also not fair to make a comment, well, if you don't get enough on the fee to apply, that you then have to have government subsidize it. You wouldn't even have the taxes that we're talking about if it wasn't for short-term rentals.
But the word subsidization means that you're using general fund money.
And it's semantics, Bob.
It is, but it's, to me as a lawyer, it's very important.
Well, I'm not a lawyer.
It's important. It's important.
All right, okay, so I don't want to take more of the time on this.
But the point being is that we're not charging enough for the fees.
Probably not. I wouldn't disagree with that, so.
And we can have this, I think, once this 2026 oddity wraps up and we come into 27 and evaluate whatever decisions are made, then we'll have a better informed idea of this is the lodging tax registration fees that we have received. And those are variable based off a bedroom at the current moment. So the size of the house indicates as also a contingent factor in the amount of fees we receive.
So we're good on zones, right? Can we discuss percentages tonight?
That's great. That's sooner you
Try to
do
get
that.
to a conclusion on that?
Sooner you do the better. And this is again not permanent. It's a hold.
We've heard 10%, we've heard 25%. I think I heard somebody say compromise.
That was you.
Oh,
I'm still at 10. I just think that it makes sense for residential. 10.
I'd be willing to go to 15 based on your 10.
Or do 15.
Yeah, I think for a marker, I'm fine if
And I'll
We
go
just-
15.
if we decide 15 is the marker, but I do like the idea, like, if we're gonna discuss occupancy, number of nights, like that,
Right.
those two go hand in hand. It's hard to say this is the right, so that's why I'm fine going to 15 because we haven't discussed night.
It can be tweaked. We can tweak it up if we need to.
Yes, because you understand the equation.
I think it's easier to tweak it up than it is to tweak it down, so I would be more in line 15 to start.
I don't have a dog in the race, but it's easier to say if we had X percentage of the homes in each zone as STRs and they only rented this many nights a year, we'd be happy with it. That's a sweet spot, right? Because we're trying to get to is balancing that number of rental nights with what percentage of STRs you might have in each zone.
One of the things that I keep having to circle back and remind myself, why are we doing all this? The more people coming in and out of the house creates disruption. We're trying to find a balance to allow everybody to live in the neighborhood and have a good quality of life. The more dense, the more population you have on the shore for those coming and going, it just is disruptive. So that's kind of how I view it, and certainly having that discussion about number of nights the intent there is to try, because more people coming in and out, more hot tub people, whatever, it's going to reduce that amount of, and whether it's a reality or it's perception. I think perception counts just as much, quite frankly, except for Ted, who's lived here since 1972, when they didn't even plow roads. Your parents actually lived here, right? Yeah.
I'm a byproduct.
Little guy.
Byproduct. Couldn't see over the
They've all
counter.
built this community as a summer community, not even a winter. You couldn't even, you had the snowshoe, right, cross-country ski or snowmobile to your house. They didn't know how to wear it,
We can see how this program works, right? Like that it captures the correct data, that it captures how many of our nights that 90 nights or 120, whatever the night that is discussed. So I think we need to make sure it works first, right? Because the whole reason is we've had so many issues with compliance. So let's make sure our software works. I think before we change the percentage. And yeah,
Can I
yes.
keep throwing onion peels at you
Yeah.
and layering this thing up? One of the concerns you probably want to noodle on is the extent to which you want to tell folks towards the end of this year, hey, by the way, with your renewal, you've been operating 365. Now there's a limit on the number of nights. They've already booked out the next year. Okay, so it's going to happen. Kind of an issue thing, right? But because you're not giving enough notice to limit the number of rental nights they're jumping into. So one approach might be to place the number lower, place the cap lower, so you're not going to get to it, but you place a cap that's lower than 25%, with the recognition they can continue on the 365 for the next year, but you put out notice that, by the way, this is on the table. And then during the year, not late in the year, during next year, you come up with the number of nights so they know in advance what they'll do. I think that's fair. Otherwise, you're going to have some people saying, I've been running 365, and now you told me overnight that I can only have 120 days. They'll be sitting on the
To piggyback off of that idea, it is not, more often than not, the cap is utilized in the region as a limiting factor rather than a cap plus a minimum plus a maximum. So just keeping in mind that the town relative to other communities has a lower ability to monitor and administer the program versus Breckenridge, which has a dedicated team of short-term rental staff to handle this. So I have no, in theory, no issues against making the item complicated. However, there are a lot of question marks that right now exist relative to the administrative capacity, how this shakes out, that I can't adequately give you information that I can, stake my claim on and say, this is how it's going to work going forward. So the more complicated we make it is completely suitable. However, we do have to acknowledge that we are a staff of 6 with 4 full-time police officers at the current moment.
Yeah, staff.
I definitely
Staff
want
of
to hear
2.
about
Staff two.
Say it's staff of 2, and I guess is the
Not to discount the contributions of the police department.
I want to keep it simple. I want to be mindful of the time that our staff spends on short-term rentals. That's part of our goal too. Whilst I agree, I would love to see a limit on the number of nights. I just don't know administratively if that's realistic right now. That's my opinion.
Just something
I don't disagree. So can we go back? Are we not going to implement a percentage?
I make a motion that we set a cap of 15% at this time and acknowledge that can be adjusted in the future, but for now, and as Bob said, we're not going to get to it. Any seconds?
Doesn't mean we should do this in this.
Because we haven't drafted. It helps. It makes it concrete, but yeah.
So yeah, I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm a team player. Scott put it in there. It doesn't make me happy, but it's not what I wanted, but I'll go along with it. So
Compromise?
that's all.
So
Yeah.
further on the compromise, we want to talk about setting the date under which people who purchased have closed on a home, at what date going forward, if those folks can come in and apply, even though we may set a 15% cap. What you're saying is, we want fewer, but we're going to give licenses.
I
It's kind of being consistent.
Grandfather.
I think January 1 is the cutoff date. 24%.
I don't know that we need to go back as far as January 1. March 15th. That covers you.
We're not serving any one person.
So I understand that.
That's all we have to go on as far as who's being affected by this. Is the
Yeah, people that have showed up and the
But
people
there
that
are
said-
people out there who are not in this room, so I just want to make sure that we're thinking that way, right?
Right. March 15th.
You had, I thought you said something about the setting of that time. Can we just do 60 days prior to the
You
moratorium?
can do
Or,
any number you want.
yeah, that's not, okay. This is 60 about last year versus this year.
This issue is really about fairness, not,
Yeah.
not legal numbers, if you will. It's about what you believe as a board is fair to people who were precluded from applying.
I think, if people wanted a short-term rent, they would have, and that was their intent this year, they would have been at these meetings, I think, complaining quite a bit. I think January 1, it's a hassle for short-term rent. Everything people have to go through. So I just don't think there's a lot of people that, just because if we say January 1, and I'm erring on the side of being fair and creating less brain damage maybe for Chad, that I'm not so sure, because if we're gonna run on licenses for some reason, there's a lot of things they have to do to keep that license. I just don't see it happening. I just don't know why it makes sense for somebody to do that, thinking that, oh, I'll get grandfathered in. If they're not short-term renting now, why would they do it?
I would say with a fair level of confidence, the primary reason we have a lower number of short-term rentals in our existing system that are licensed this year is because of people were not able or willing to comply with the additional regulations as stipulated to retain a license in 2026. So I think that will be another item that yeah.
What do you think?
I think 60 days. That makes sense to me.
And this includes the people that have applications in that had issues arise that kept them from getting it at the time.
I was going to make that distinction as a one point, and then
Yeah,
another
'cause we're
point
talking about
being,
purchase.
is it splitting hairs to note if there are people that close during this given date and have not ever reached out to the town regarding short-term rentals, but now are understanding with this policy, whatever is decided, that they are now in this window of opportunity that they may not grasp again.
Well, I mean,
Just to put that out there, not that it needs to be necessarily a one-to-one address, but just
I think that's why it makes sense of like 60-day.
60
I
days
also,
time, but
it doesn't, there's people who don't come into the meetings and talk and don't feel comfortable, and I wouldn't want to exclude them because they weren't in the way.
what about January 1? Why not January 1?
I just,
Just curious.
I don't know, because I think you would have known if you bought for short-term rental. I don't know.
I'm just asking a question. I'm
No,
not
I know,
trying to
yeah.
be difficult.
No, I get it. I don't know.
I don't know
Hear
how
what other
many more
people say.
people that would be, or how many properties that would be that we'd even be talking about.
I just wouldn't know unless you put it out there.
if this was to have the idea that dialogue has been made or some form of effort has been made of those properties in a given period of time that the town has already acknowledged and we've received, that does make that change of having people from January 1st, the current date, that have not done anything with the town of expressing interest or doing anything related to the application. So is that a distinction we want to make here? Is that a viable distinction? I also need to make from a legal perspective. I don't know. I also don't know if that's something that I can even make that distinction. So I don't
What
want
would 60 days, sorry, you were saying 60 days from the, putting the moratorium into effect. What would that date be?
It's March 19th, which is why I said March
If
15th.
you guys, I mean, I'd be okay with that. It's just if we get a people pushing back on it, I think we should discuss it. Like, I definitely think the cutoff should be sometime this year. Whether it was the beginning of the year or March 16th, 60 days prior, we're attempting to be fair.
Well, we're also
Just to
attempting to
analyze-
lower the number overall of short-term rentals, which is why 60 days is probably enough. Because of our overarching goal, which is to reduce the number over the course of many years, probably. But we have to start somewhere, and 60 days prior to the moratorium going into effect seems reasonable to me. Does it, I mean, I also, I'm not opposed to January 1.
Also, it's kind of like, most of my views, I'm minority here. Just trying to be the devil's advocate. If we were to go 60 days, I don't have a problem with that. If we get a lot of people coming and saying, I really, the pushback, Chad's the ones that are taking calls, maybe we need to rethink it. If they come in and say, but for some reason we haven't thought about this. And they were one of those people that was between January 1 and March. Why they should get one.
I prefer just to do a date, right? So if it's January 1, then it is. You know what I mean? Like, I would like to set it and then that's what it is, instead of reconsidering and doing all that. So I would say if you were just for January 1, then. I mean, I'd rather do that than keep going back and forth. We have so much to do
So you might,
before December that I really wanna.
you might join the first party again, like.
I'll-
That's awesome.
This one way.
Okay.
Sorry.
January 1?
Yeah.
January,
We're all
I-
gonna do this.
I- I'll make a motion that we set the date of this grandfathering, how would you say that?
I'm sorry.
I'm making a
January
motion,
1 is the date.
January 1.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that the date is January 1.
Were you guys talking about something though that
Yeah,
needs to be said?
there's a number of,
I'll hold my motion.
hold the motion, there's a number of people who have owned their house for a while, applied, but didn't get their license because the moratorium got put in place. They applied, they're waiting in the
It
wings.
was a documentation issue or something of that nature that the town had reached out on prior occasions and
Absolutely.
said,
I would think they'd be right in there with the people that are under contract to purchase.
Aren't these the people that, correct me if I'm wrong, that drove you to almost insanity in the middle of January before we even had a Chad and we still had a Steve? And aren't these the people that were missing a document and or blew you off or whatever? I mean, you were dealing with it and it was a hair pulling experience, as I recall distinctly.
I don't think it's the people in general.
I don't
think
mean them
It
specifically.
was the volume of work, reaching out to people.
Okay.
I think that's what I think it was. It was just the volume.
Well, how many people are we talking about that
because
didn't get their license?
This is the thing though, if I can
20,
mention-
24?
is it 15? I want, John, I think you have a better idea of the general the proximity. I would want to wager to say 15 to 20 that are in that limbo period.
Yes.
What I'd like to say though is I know, people who decided not to pay and get a license in 2026 because they don't want to pay the new fees.
What about?
So how do you distinct that? I mean, I get it and I'm with that and I understand there's been particular people who have discussed and have said that they thought they had a license or whatever. But I do believe if you open a certain gate, then you're gonna get people who didn't get a license and then now they know that they can't get one. And and we're allowing what they did, but I guess we could find it out in the taxes. I don't really, who knows?
More
I don't know,
work.
it's something to think about though, because just because somebody didn't get a license because they were trying to save $1,200 doesn't really make me excited to give them a license.
Let me tell you this, I think, opinion, that someone who rented without a license should not be eligible for anything, period. Because our current ordinance says if you rent without a license, you're suspended for 3 years, period. So why would we reward people out there who have bucked the system, not paid taxes, rented out their place, didn't get a license, didn't pay the fees, and say, come on, you're welcome. That to me, that just makes my mind itch.
Would there be any reason that somebody thought they had a license that didn't have a license? Is there a
The
category?
town will provide the documentation on every single instance that you have received licensure for the given year. It is received via email, and once all the documents that are required, we've received them, we've reviewed them, then we issue licensure, and that is active for the remainder of the calendar year. So in theory, if someone's checking their email that we have on their licensure that they've applied for, they will have received a license issuance. So that is how people are aware of that information. That, and if you go on CitizenServe, you can always, you have that information at your disposal.
So the short answer, it would become impossible for somebody to say, well, I applied or I didn't get a license, but I thought I had one.
Yeah,
I think that's a stretch.
it's tough to. I guess and then it follows down the rabbit hole of the distinction of is it acceptable for people who filed lodging taxes appropriately but haven't done their proper documentation to get a license, or is it the other way around? They file their documentation but haven't done lodging taxes, because we have both and we have a mixture of that. They all exist across the spectrum. It just is there a weight to one set of documents that exists that supersedes another that becomes very splitting hairs.
But in my view, if they had a license but didn't pay taxes, that's one issue that we prosecute, right? With back taxes,
Yeah.
right? And if they don't pay, then they get their license revoked. But if they never had a license, even though they were paying taxes, they didn't have a license. The current code says they're banned for 3 years. I mean, having a license is the first step. Taxes are second step.
Do you think there's actually people that do that?
That don't have license and rental?
They don't have, no. They don't have a license, but still pay a lodging tax?
Yes.
Yes, we have people that don't that do not understand the process the town is working under and have paid lodging taxes but do not have a license that exists in the current calendar year. So there's it really runs the gamut. There's all sorts of randomness going on.
Well, God, what do you do there? I mean, they're
Go back to March
they're
15th.
trying- Oh, God.
No. I don't, you have to put lines down.
Yeah, it has to be there.
It has
If
to
you
be objective
didn't,
lines.
if you didn't follow the rules to get to that point, you didn't follow the rules to get to that point.
Period.
I err on that side. I just didn't think that someone would actually pay a lodging tax and not get a license unless they were sitting there, I just want to save a little money. I get that side.
We'll receive payments where we receive payments of various numbers, some of them being proper according to either like they paid the registration fee but didn't do any documentation, so they couldn't get a licensure. They paid the wrong registration fee from previous years and assumed that was their compliance requirements in order to get a license, and then don't check to see whether they have a license. The third option being that they didn't submit registration. They may not have submitted a registration fee, provided documentation that didn't pin against because they never paid the registration fee, and now we're paying lodging taxes with the assumption that they have a license. So it's
That
very
sounds like more likely, right?
Yeah.
They're assuming they have a license
Yes.
because they pay the tax.
And in past years, the requirements were lesser to the extent that if someone did not read the ordinance that was provided and mailed out by the town, or reading the requirements associated with the 2026 renewal, and went through the assumption that they used the prior methodology and didn't check their email to see that they had or did not have an issued license. That's where we sit with quite a few existing.
Well, part of the
properties.
policy too was that you have to put your license number on your list.
Correct.
So if it wasn't there, you'd never had a license. And that was,
And-
that was like one of the rules that we came up with last year. So to me, it's in the directions on what
So
you happen to need to do.
When these taxes come in,
Yes.
do you know, or did Michelle know what they were for?
You can make it's usually they'll make a good they'll sometimes put it in, but the challenge is also that we will sometimes receive payment of lodging tax and not a lodging tax report. So we will receive numbers with no backup documentation, or at times vice versa, which is much less common, where you receive a lodging tax report and not the
I
payment
guess
for the lodging
where
tax
I'm
report.
going with this is at your level, where you are, John, and you have to deal with this, and Michelle would do it. Was it like, okay, here's this money that came in, they must be short-term renting. They're obviously short-term renting, we should probably call them and say, you need a short-term license.
Right, in some cases, they have a license and they'll send money in, but you don't know how to apply it, so you have to reach out to them.
Because they didn't submit a lodging tax
Additional-
report. So that's also an issue with existing
Or the
licenses
statute.
where there's not a consistency of people submitting lodging tax reports and payments simultaneously in a method that we can actually assess them.
Right.
So that's an existing problem as well with licenses that we have issued. There are ones out there that have not paid lodging tax this year.
Is that something the software will also help?
Yes. I can't guarantee it'll be the magic pill, but it'll help.
But the problem with it, the question is, we've made an exception for the people that purchased something this year, the people that obviously are under contract now, or, and maybe got caught up, weren't able to do it because of an administrative, they didn't do it, it was just a mistake.
Yeah.
And then we got this new issue, I don't know what to do. What's, the issue is like, the people that have been paying the lodging tax, but they made the assumption, and I don't know.
But it sounded like
But
they
you know
were,
what happens
they were
when you
given the
assume.
ordinance and they were given the information saying you're not following the procedures and
Yeah,
It doesn't work like you didn't check your email.
the license, the business license is the first thing. You
It's-
get the business license first, that short-term rental
There's a
license.
part of
Yeah.
me that
Then
can't believe
you
somebody
start
didn't
doing
know this.
Yeah.
They
business.
realized. There's a part of me that just I can't believe that people don't know that. Or don't.
And that's
Right.
Yeah.
the
And
big
so I don't really have a huge amount of empathy, but that's just how I feel right now.
You must have been living under a rock if you're running STR in the state of Colorado and you don't think to get a license.
It's in the paper
It's
every other
Every
week.
single, right, so I think they either were not paying attention intentionally or unintentionally,
Okay.
but the bottom line is that you have the ability to cut them out and have them wait for the attrition.
I think I got it. Because we're trying to make decisions, I'm gonna have to go on that.
it's through no fault of our own.
That's right, it's not our fault. And I have to say this, just so the board, you don't have to let anybody in the door. If you set the cap at 15, you can say no to anybody who didn't have a license before.
Yeah.
Legally. But you're struggling in this gray area of what you do with these folks.
It's a lot of
But what's fair, right? What's fair.
Trying, yeah.
There is a complex number of scenarios of what non-compliance
Probably
looks
something
like.
we need to
So
take up.
why don't we go back to
Sale of the house.
60 days prior to the beginning of the moratorium? Because the first of the year brings in all these other people that didn't have their paperwork sorted out, didn't have their ducks in a row, didn't get things done on time, didn't make a payment with their documents or whatever.
Are those two different things? Or no? One and the same?
Well, there's varying shades of why they didn't get a license. It could be a little tiny minor document that they didn't submit and we haven't issued a license yet. It could be they blew off most of the program requirements and they didn't get a license. So we don't know.
That person that does that, I'd ask, did you short-term rent last year? Yes or no? You know,
You
if you
don't have to ask
did,
them
and
anything.
you're now using this as an excuse that you didn't know, that you short-term,
I will make a note that most of the applications that existed in that limbo that didn't provide documentation, most rented in previous years.
The renewal.
It's a renewal application. It is not a new license number. Our license numbers are issued at, they are LR and then the last two digits of the year. So whatever year it was issued is that digit of the license number. So most of them have an LR 25 or previous.
The problem is that there's a percentage of people who just didn't get the license because they didn't want to pay the fee, and we haven't been doing compliance, and they've known that, and so there was no need to get licensed. Right, so there's that portion, so if you say, you know, if they didn't even go through the motion of getting a license, then it doesn't make sense, right? If they didn't go through the motion, the other one would be the people who made they tried, they were trying to upload their documents.
They
were
had a
doing this.
license last year.
They had a license last year, they were trying to upload, I think those two are different to me than those who were like, well, I had a license and unfortunately I didn't get this in, or I didn't get that, and to me, those are two different categories.
And I think it's a little.
You had to start a step.
The question being is this also an issue where they have rented in a given year without a license? And because because they didn't follow the proper procedure, but they assumed they had, and they are still renting without a license, which according to the code requires a 3-year ban.
Maybe we can get to the issue this.
Yeah.
This is getting
It's
complicated.
getting very complicated.
I think somebody, this way.
Yeah.
Would write down all the different scenarios under which somebody may have not gotten a license in this year. They were a previous renter, they did not renew, or they submitted a renewal application, it was incomplete, therefore they didn't get a license. What do you want to do with them? This person described them. What do you want to do with them? So you have something to work on, because right now we're skipping around from different sorts of people, and you're getting, I'm getting.
I'll try. I can make a general assessment of the different scenarios. There's dozens of complex scenarios if you want to go down to the 5 or 6 documents that we required for submittal. If you were doing individual numbers of documents, that's a different story. If we going through the process of documents and submittal of documents, I can make that as a category.
It might come down to a caption that would say they made a good faith effort. Okay, and there'll be people below and above that line. So
Well, I think made some good strides tonight. I think anything further might just
My head
be a
was
little,
wrong.
so I mean, I would like
Premature.
to end this portion unless we need to make a motion on the January 1st or the March 15th.
I was gonna suggest that we come make sure that I get this information correct about what this.
January 1, that's my vote.
We haven't made a motion or taken a vote
You
yet.
should withdraw a vote.
Okay. Oh my gosh. If we were to vote and we voted on the March 15th, that's easy. If we take it back to January 1st, that's where all these other people come into play, and that's where the complications come in. We capped it at 15, we decided that, we voted on it, it's done. To me, it makes sense to go back 60 days from the moratorium. The moratorium was done under an emergency basis based on the lawyer definition of emergency, not because it was a factual emergency on the ground, the house wasn't on fire. But it did not necessarily give a lot of forewarning, even though the board knew we were talking about short-term rentals. That kind of did come and happen on May 19th. And I would recommend that we go back 60 days from there. And prior to that, they had their shot at the title.
That's the basis upon which you have to make that decision, is that there's an assumption to be made that if they wanted a license, they would have submitted 30 days.
They would have dotted I's, crossed T's, followed up, followed through, paid their payments, done their thing, and they'd have a license and they'd be fat, dumb, and happy today.
I agree with March 15th. I mean, I know I said January and I was gonna get on my way at the end of the month.
My concern,
I mean, it does make sense.
I was on your wagon.
I just want to give a fair amount of time to the people. That's my deal. And I don't see, I guess I just don't see the logic that you see and maybe other people do, this gap between January 1 and March 15th, that segment of people might have, be manipulating the system.
There was a lot of people after January 1 that didn't have licenses, and they didn't have licenses because of things that they failed to do.
But did they rent the previous year and not have a license? Or and that's how I would
think
read
the
those
thing that,
people.
and I agree with that, and Jody. The thing that we need to look at part of is, I like March 15th. I'll say that out front. I think the part where you go back even further, remember the carrot that you're dangling, right? You're basically offering a lifetime license if you can somehow say that you were in this group, right? Where just like I said, but you didn't do any of the things you needed. But now we're giving you a one-time shot at what could be a lifetime license, right? This isn't just
At the same time that we're trying to pare them down.
exactly. So I agree.
I want to make sure we're very clear about this distinction that this January 1st or March 15th, regardless, it will not have ever had a license under that title hold, that property owner on that exact address in a previous year. So this has nothing to do with the renewal period that happened from November 1st to December 31st. This is an entirely different discussion that we're having right now.
It's new licenses only.
New licenses only. Renewals are a different scenario because they would have no way of having an existing license.
Yeah. Right.
And it's a difference between reform, because there's some people that have reformed to a LLC from instead of an existing property name of ownership. So that's also, I don't know if that's a functional distinction or not, and I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But that's the only way that would have had any change, and they still retain the same information of license number. It's just that they changed the ownership documentation, which would have been required during that window or before the moratorium. So that's a different scenario. We're just talking about
March 15th or whatever makes you guys happy, I'll jump on that then.
I make a motion.
You wanna make
Okay,
an
go ahead,
effort?
I make a motion that we backdate the application for processing new applications to March 15th.
New homeowners.
No,
New
Wait.
licenses.
it was just people, because people might have been remodeling their place. Maybe they're under construction.
I was going to ask about this distinction as well before we make sure we detail this, because theoretically, someone could be remodeling for two plus years.
Right now, let's
That's-
just do
that's
on,
the challenge.
on new purchases that have been done March 15th or after. We could do two different things there, and I think there's just too much. I think you've got the I think that we all agree on the March 15th for the people who
That's a
have
manageable chunk.
purchased a home for the first time, and it would be a first time license if they purchased before March 15th,
No,
correct?
after March.
After March 15th.
Yes.
But I'm not ready, like, I think it's time to end and more thinking and more information to go with furthermore, and that's what I feel.
And you need to see the numbers that we're talking
Yeah,
about.
right.
These categories, because it could be, hey, we wanna restrict them,
Do
and
we
here's
talk about
25 new licenses.
So my motion stands as I make a motion that if you are a new homeowner and have never had a license in the town of Blue River, between the dates of March 15th and May 19th,
Purchased.
you
Close,
purchased,
close,
closed on your house, during that time, you are eligible to seek a first time ever license, new license.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Reluctantly, aye.
All those, okay. Let's, yeah,
We're gonna bag out of here. 'Cause
Yeah.
I had an idea, I wanna make sure I say it before I forget about it. We should, with all new and renewal licenses that we issue, we should put a special notice with the license as the town is thinking about and likely to impose.
yes.
Limitations on the numbers of nights, so that people who have 24/7, 365, because these new people who may apply are thinking, I got a house, I'm never gonna live there, I just wanna run a business. They need to be told when they get the license, by the way, you probably won't be able to do this. You need to know that. That's right. I think it's only fair.
So what do we need to do for that? Do we need to make a motion or do we just need to direct Chad?
But I'll put it on the record so that you can.
Bob, put it on the record so that you don't forget.
Yeah.
Chad, execute.
Yeah. Get to work.
Is that okay with everyone if we move forward? I think we've accomplished quite a bit in this meeting and
Yeah.
our brains need.
We only have a couple more policy adjacent items outstanding, but the core policy items have been addressed at this meeting, which is positive, and we can potentially have a veer into enforcement once we can carve out those remaining few less consequential but still consequential policy items.
And we're getting enough policy by you that allows Chad and I to write up some of the provisions that you might see in a new ordinance, so that we can start fashioning them. They may not have numbers in them, not permanent, but you'll see how it would structure. Okay, and then when are we gonna do enforcement? When the next one's 25th?
Well, the board has to decide the next viable date of a subsequent special meeting. I can either do a poll or the board can discuss this at this existing, because we have a quorum, obviously, so we are allowed to have this discussion and we can make this decision. I had this potentially also listed as a other matters in next week's meeting, but I would rather probably have this discussion now than put another item in next week's meeting that has a bunch of various wheeling pieces.
Right, what's your
So
proposal?
my schedule's open, if you wanna do the poll or if you wanna do it here, it doesn't matter.
I think we can do it here if we have quorum.
Whatever we can do that.
I'm waiting for Chad.
Well,
They
I
keep this our
have-
next regular schedule.
I am
Correct.
cleared for any of the dates, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I have a potential obligation those Thursdays or Fridays that I don't know for certain if my availability.
You're talking about
The last weekend of the month, excuse me, sorry, I should have said that up for that.
24th
Yes.
to the 28th.
Yes, so Monday, 24, 25, 26, 27, or 28. My preference being between the 24th to the 26th. I can do any of those evenings.
All three of
How
those are
about we
free.
do like 25th, because aren't you guys off on Monday, and then that would make more sense.
I think that generally works better for staff if we're willing to follow the.
Yeah,
Follow
let's
this-
do it on Monday. You need to
Yeah.
So why don't we do,
Yeah.
can everybody do Tuesday, the 25th at 5 p.m.?
Yes.
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 Yeah, okay.
Think.
Okay.
And we will format what the context of that discussion may look like as we go forward and try to get it out in front of you guys.
Any new business? Do we make the motion for the executive session or adjourn for this?
Let's adjourn, well, make a motion, get a vote, and then let people know they're not coming back.
I make a motion, for an executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6 402 4B to receive legal advice and answer specific questions concerning potential changes to federal and state government decisions making processes for use of the highway rights of way.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passed.
Okay, so that motion passed, and let everybody know that we're not coming back into session.
We are not coming back.
So what we did, we can't do business after.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yes, so then we have to direct adjourn, we after.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks. All right, thank you all for coming.
And can we do a 5-minute break?
Yes.